Can you all hear me back there? Great. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September meeting of the Board of Architecture Review and the Planning Board. So we have, first on the agenda, continuation of a public hearing with respect to the site plan for Eden Cove.
Good evening. If I could, Mr. Chairman, can I just perhaps give a brief overview introduction before you deliberate? Michael Zara on behalf of Plateau Associates. You've all received and we've received the County 239M memo and reviewed it. The Kellard Sessions memo 920 we received today. Draft secret findings, you've received, I believe, a 921 correspondence we've made to you regarding the discussions with the village board and the enhanced office building design. I guess everyone's hard work and diligence, I think we're at a critical juncture in this application. Respectfully, if I could suggest, with all these moving pieces, at least what we view as the appropriate path going forward. On the county letter, with respect to the Cove cars, we will deliver next day or two a just further explanation, clarifying some of the issues that they raised. Obviously, the county supports the concept, and I think contrary to the comment, we're not necessarily seeking a density increase, you know, pursuant to the Cove cars. I mean, it does go to maybe one point in the lead checklist, but we'll answer those questions and explain. I don't think that's a very heavy lift. The issue of the pavilion that was raised by Kellard, as you know, we had good meetings with the village administrator and chief, and we've enhanced the plan to use more of the materials, actual materials from the building, assuming that HPC and no other party wants to acquire the building, and I know the village, I believe, has indicated they're not interested in acquiring the building. So we did present a enhanced, larger building using more of the materials. We would submit that that should be a condition of approval with respect to the final design. You know, once we get the HPC input, then we can complete the grading and erosion control in connection with the new design, and that would be appropriate for a condition of approval, subject to the approval of village engineer or building inspector regarding the final building permit. We would also condition of approval, which is typical, is the construction management plan, because I know one of the comments in the Kellard letter was just the sequencing of the building, of the pavilion, and the stockpiling of material and demolition and the like, and we will incorporate that into our construction management plan, and that would, I think, that's very often a typical condition of approval. With respect to the Kellard, with respect to the sewer and the additional inspections, again, that's another typical condition of approval. We agreed to do the closed circuit television inspection and undertake any necessary repairs based on that inspection, and then obtain the approval of the village engineer, and then we require the county health department. So again, that's another, what I would submit as a typical. We also have a number of the easement agreements and other agreements that are typically conditions of approval. And finally, anything that might affect the roof treatment, we've already indicated that potentially solar and other things, if there's anything final, then that would be a condition of approval that would be reviewed by the building engineer prior to obtaining a building permit. So those are really, having read the outstanding letters and conversations I know we've had with you, those are really the only outstanding issues, respectfully, that have been submitted or exchanged. There was, I think, a reference to an email that you received and we responded to with respect to the question of a potential intermittent versus free-flowing water body, and we responded to that respectfully, that's really a red herring. Whether that water course is intermittent or perennial does not impact the design of the culvert, as long as a new culvert is designed and has been designed with capacity for flow during storm events, which we've done, and I know Keller has reviewed. We've gone through the DEC classifications. It is not a trout stream. It is not a designated fish habitat. Actually, the characterization or the relevance of an intermittent versus a perennial stream or a free-flowing is found in the regulations regarding speedies permits, and usually discharges from waste plants into streams. Intermittent streams have different specifications for wastewater discharge versus free-flowing and perennial streams. That's where you find the relevance for those. But again, we're not really impacting this. It's really just being directed by the culvert, and we're not having any impact on its classification or otherwise that should impact our application. So with that said, we would assume that as far as the pathway, that you're going to discuss your proposed secret findings tonight. We would love to have them adopted tonight or the next meeting, October 23rd. The 30-day period terminates October 15th. Obviously, we would extend that to October 23rd if that's the board's pleasure to vote the secret findings at the next meeting. Based upon, as I've just mentioned, those what I think of very limited issues, outstanding issues that were raised, we would request that you close the site plan hearing tonight. I think it's more than meet the standards and meet the criteria. 62 days would be November 26th to vote. We would ask that you authorize the preparation of a resolution on the site plan, which would cover those items that just mentioned that were raised in the last round of comments. We have to still go before the ZBA and the village board for the special permit, and we've obviously begun that process, but we can't finalize that until SECRA is completed and issued. So 62 days would be November 26th. However, the earliest that we could probably come back before you for approval would be November 27th, and if the ZBA or the village board doesn't vote the night of their hearing, then we would probably be back before you in December. So if that would occur or that occurs, we would obviously extend the 62 days, and that shouldn't be an issue. So with that said, I mean, you know, we're obviously here to answer any questions, and we strongly hope that as we can close the site plan hearing, authorize the resolution, finalize the secret findings, and move on. I think we've all worked very hard to get to where we are today, and we hope that we can take the next step.
Thank you, Mr. Zarin.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wishes to comment? This is the public hearing. If not, okay. how would we like to proceed? There are essentially two issues. And I think we've heard the answer. We have to deliberate on a bit tonight. We also have to decide whether we collected enough information from the public to close the public hearing. Now, what I heard tonight is that when we close the public hearing, there's a 62-day clock. However, the applicant is willing to waive that clock. There seem to be a lot of gates that we need to get through before we actually can make a final determination, or act at least, in an official capacity. We can take one thing at a time. Let's talk about the public hearing and the status of that. So I think the only thing that is, my opinion anyway, is that there are some open items, but I think most of what I heard can be covered in site plan. Jim, am I correct with that?
Yeah, do I need a microphone? I think, well,
Yes, you do.
I think, so, I think that depends on what you determine with respect to the secret findings draft that you have in front of you. But you also don't know what is going to come out of those zoning board and village board meetings. So if something comes out of it that requires deliberation or input from the public and you've closed the hearing, you've closed the hearing. So it's up to you. I think so that's my answer to that.
So, since I'm not a lawyer, if new information, since evidence shows up, that would require public input, we don't have the ability to open the hearing again?
I think that's problematic if you've once closed it. You've started this clock. I think at a minimum, you could be in quite a debate about whether you could do that.
If I could, please, two items are potentially before the boards with respect to new information. One is the ZBA is the width of the building, 5 feet. That's the only issue for ZBA, which you've already opined that you thought was acceptable, and if the building inspector issues a positive opinion on that, we wouldn't even be before the ZBA. So
What about?
I don't think that would.
What about the actual access?
The actual what, I'm sorry?
Dedicated street versus easement, isn't that before the board? Should that be before the board?
One of the issues before the board is whether it's going to grant that additional width down at where the road pinches, at the what I'll call the bottom. Suppose, for example, they said we're not, then this board would have to further deliberate about what's going to happen.
ZBA issue or a village board issue?
Pardon me?
ZBA issue or village board issue?
It's both, really. Just the village board, the village board's being asked to grant the right to use a portion of what I think we call Lot 6, to widen the road down there to make it 30 feet. Regardless, I think the presentation to the zoning board is going to be, we're expecting to get that, and assuming we do, is our access okay?
And so the fact that there are a series of easements that get access to the property makes the notion of needing to have access to a public road, no, because the easements exist?
No. I think we're talking about two different issues. One is that.
We are.
Yeah. So one is it, I'm going to speak not in legal terms, is it acceptable to have the access to this building be over a right-of-way that is not a public road? That's one.
That's right.
Two is assuming that it's okay to have it over the easements, because the easements are proven out to be solid. Two is it an adequate road, wide enough, for example, to service the development? one of the factors that informs that decision is whether the village board is going to grant the requested added width to make the road 30 feet down at the pinch point. That's before the village board went down.
And if they don't, is not a variance the option to that?
If they don't, then I think it would have to come back to you, and you'd have to consider whether, I don't know what the zoning board would do, let's just talk about you, whether you would be willing to grant the site plan approval, notwithstanding the fact that the road is not going to be 30 feet in its entirety, though it has been presented as that's what we're expecting to give you, and you'd have to decide whether any adjustments have to be made, or how that would be dealt with, or whether it's okay with you.
So, I guess I think I got the answer to my question.
Yeah, and the answer, I think, I agree fully with the way Mr. Stout described it. I guess the only thing I would take issue with, this board, if they close the hearing and material new issues arose because in any of the changes, and it would change the project to the extent that you would want to take additional comments, I would submit you can always reopen the public hearing. And we're waiving here any objection. If there's a material change in the project, at any time, frankly, you could even do it in your secret findings. You can make secret findings, and there's a material change, you can reopen those. But this is, you know, this is the process. It's not indefinite. People close, they move on, and
I was just trying to count the number of things you know, at least the Board of Zoning Appeals.
yeah, there's very few. The only one is really the only one is the zoning. The ZBA is just a matter of interpretation, whether we get it as a public street or we get it pursuant to our private easement. That's not going to change.
That's on their agenda. That will be on their agenda.
That will be on their agenda.
The second is if the village board does not grant you the sliver of
Correct.
property.
And then there's a third, which I don't know what was said before I came in, but, and I'm sorry I was late, I got caught.
No,
in
you
tra-
came.
I got
You
caught.
came
in
at the
traffic.
right time.
Am I correct that the village board is considering the special permit to permit you to grant the density bonuses?
Correct. That's right.
That's also on the table. What if, that doesn't come out the way it's expected, the applicant hopes it to, or they have some condition or so? These are things to consider.
I guess they have a site tree if they want to the building.
Yeah, that's.
Well, then they'd have to come back into the site.
Respectfully, that wouldn't be a public hearing issue. That would be a project
Start again.
debt issue.
Right.
It would mean a revision to the
It'd be
site.
an Article
It would
78
mean the
issue.
site plan would have to be revised.
Right.
But
I don't know,
But that's interesting, actually. Because by keeping it, we can actually reopen the site plan and do it versus starting essentially,
that's correct.
whatever
Yeah.
that beginning would be again.
Yeah. I wonder if it would help, you've got a full meeting, so you may not want to do so. If you want to take a minute for an attorney-client advice session, and I think I could do it in a minute on this topic, might be some legal information I want to give. That's up to you.
Whatever's gonna make the path straighter, I'm happy to do. So
All
let's
right. I
take
promise I can
5
do this in a
minutes.
minute.
Can you hear me again? I can barely hear myself up here. Something's going.
We need to, something.
So it's going, but that's all right, as long as the people, can you all hear me in the room?
how do you turn this on?
Okay, well,
No.
well, people at home can hear me. So, anyway, thank you. I think, back to where we left off, there are at least 2 boards to be heard from. ZBA on one interpretation and one maybe if the village board doesn't grant the easement, whatever it is going to be at the front of the entrance so that the road width can be 30 feet wide. The second one is the village board has a second agenda before it, which is granting a special permit that allows for the densities. So, at least in my mind, the one that's most impactful to any site plan hearing that we have open now is, should the village board not grant the density bonus for the special permit? That has a significant change on the site plan review. So, with that framework, I'd like to hear your opinions as to where we go with this, the hearing of the site plan. And whether we should remain open or closed.
Joe, I think we should, in my opinion, keep it open, but I think we should expedite or move forward to the extent that we can those issues to the other two boards to get started and leave the site plan open in the meantime.
So, just to be clear, is the village board aware and actively looking at the density bonus and the special permit, or is that something that they're sitting there waiting for us?
They've gotten, the application has been received. In fact, that's what resulted in the letter from the county planning department. But ultimately, it requires a recommendation from the planning board to go back to the board of trustees.
So, okay, so that's one. The second, since there's a second agenda item before the village board, which is the commitment to road. Does it make sense for the planning board to also say that in the best interest of planning, the village should give serious thought to granting that easement?
I think whatever your view of it is, it makes sense for you to communicate it to the village board. I think the village board, in its original resolution, expected you to give such a report. So I think that would help the process move along if you could do that.
Okay.
We would concur with that. A positive referral from this board would be meaningful
All right.
and move it along the process.
Okay, so, now, do we have to do anything with a recommendation to the Board of Zoning people? There.
You are not required to. If you wish to, you may. In other words,
Well, we don't really, for part two, which is the village board says no to the width issue, width of the road issue, that may or may not be go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, because if the village board says okay, then no variance is required.
yeah, I don't know how that's going to be sequenced, but I would say that if you have told the village board that, you think that's a good idea, that will certainly, I'm sure, be communicated to the zoning board by the applicant.
I'm just trying to get how many letters somebody's got to draft.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I think that's reasonable.
I think there's one other issue that I think we still have the opportunity to consider. We talked about it last meeting, but that was the width of the building. There's a provision that allows us to consider that.
Well, with that's, I think, awaiting the building inspector's determination.
As to whether you will do that or the zoning board will do it.
That's with the 5 feet.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's-
It's an interpretation.
So we're waiting for a building inspector determination because the building inspector is the first interpreter of the zoning ordinance. And I think the applicant's going to have some input to that, which is fair, right? And then it will depend on what the building inspector says.
Okay, so I think aside from letter writing that somebody's got to do, we need to act on a couple of things. One is whether we close the public hearing or adjourn it until at least we've heard from the interested boards.
Leave it open until we hear from the other groups.
Okay, can I be heard, please, Mr. Chairman? We haven't had one person from the public in the last 2 or 3 meetings. I mean, we've heard from the public. It is common, and not even common, it's normal procedure that these issues, conditions of approval, you have to go to other boards before you have your final vote. So to close the public hearing, especially where for the last 3 or 4 meetings, there's been no new testimony, is an absolutely normal, typical procedure. And again, if, for example, something happens that materially changes our proposal, there's no regulation I'm aware of that doesn't allow you to reopen. We've done it throughout, and without having to go back, quote unquote, from the beginning.
So let me ask you a question. So what's the downside for the applicant, for the public hearing on the site plan to remain?
Okay. It allows you to begin the next step of preparing a resolution. You've closed the public hearing. You can now start preparing your resolution. Obviously, that's going to be subject to any additional information that comes from these boards, which, again, I don't think the only one that would have any real substantial impact was a rejection of our zoning or not issuing a permit, which would have nothing to do with, we'd reopen, but it would be a much larger issue than just tweaking. But it does allow you, as happened with the SECRA, you close the SECRA, you close the public hearing, you authorize your consultants and your staff to begin preparing the resolutions. It's a necessary step to move the process forward and that doesn't preclude reopening for any reason. And I would, as I've said to you before, I'm not aware of it losing the clock, but we would certainly waive any 62 days if it ever had to be reopened for any material change. Or I'm already saying we're going to waive any if the ZBA and the board time prevents the 62-day. That's usually the major impediment to why boards don't like to close it, is the 62 days, and they feel under undue pressure. But again, we've already said that that's probably going to be waived anyhow because of the way the ZBA and the village board has to sequentially approve. So that shouldn't weigh into your consideration, deliberation. That clock will not tick in that respect.
So, and I think what you said is true, with the exception of the fact that those 2 things that are out there that are beyond this board's control are going to have a weight on whatever resolutions we prepare. I think you could build some of it, but not all of it. But it's so far I've only heard cases.
Don't we also still have in this finding statement here that the alternative East Road is still an option if the west should fall through? I think it still is in the document, correct?
The way the document is drafted, the secret funding statement is drafted, is that the alternative West Road is your preference, but if, I'm going to speak again, not legalisms,
right,
but if the West Road cannot reasonably be accomplished, then the East Road is acceptable to you.
Right, so wouldn't it be better, since we all have sort of deliberated at length, that we like the West Road best, and you have spent so much time engineering-wise, and we have here discussed it as the preferable, it's been detailed in much greater length than the East option. Wouldn't it be better to keep it open so that we could get the zoning board and the village to say, okay, of the 3 parameters that are outstanding, which is east of our village property. The zoning will say that it's okay to go wider, and the village giving you the okay for using their property and as well as the density. That way, we can finalize this as the
That
complete
the
document.
issue that you raised about the east of the west road, we've, the way, correct, the way it's written and the way we presented it to in our site plan, that both roads have been studied. We both prefer the west road. But that relies on us making sure that we have all the final agreements with all parties. We have the right, and you studied that both are viable. So that won't necessarily get resolved till afterwards, and that's gonna be a condition of approval. If for any reason, again, you have all the right to reopen if something material happened, but if the ZBA, for example, or the village board does not grant that small piece of land, then the only change is we already have, there's already a village road there. We just wouldn't build the sidewalk because they won't allow us to build a sidewalk on that portion. It'll still be a 24-foot road, which is what the road is today. So that's not gonna have a material, the only issue that could have a material impact on the project is the village board refuses the permit. But that, again, that's normal in almost every application. You go to boards or you have conditions of approval, and if you don't meet any of those conditions, you have to go back to the board and reopen because the project changes. I mean, most projects we have, and this project too, I mean, the finding statement already has a page of conditions in it, proposed conditions.
So, Mike, I think we veered off that.
If you want each of our opinions, my opinion is, I understand that the applicant has agreed to waive certain timelines, but in my opinion, I think it makes practice, I'm just gonna say it, just so we can maybe move on, is I think we should keep it open. I think that we should make a referral to the village board. We should include positive language about the width of the opening there, in our opinion, from a planning view, and get that started.
I think you're.
I agree with that.
I agree.
Yeah,
We should
I
leave it open.
agree.
There's too many moving parts that I don't feel comfortable with
Right.
that finalizing.
Well, sincerely, I don't have a problem with closing the public hearing. Really, I'm in the minority.
Okay. So,
Can we ask, since I can see the vote has gone against us, can we request that the board authorize their consultants to begin preparing the resolution? So at least we have movement, and that's, as I said before, that's sort of the critical juncture.
is there a motion to do that?
I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
I
The
think that's,
resolution to
begin?
refer?
yeah, to start the preparation.
For us to start drafting a site plan.
Absolutely.
Oh, site plan, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that at all.
Good, thank you.
Jeff?
I'll move.
I second that, yeah.
Okay.
And,
Now,
and do you need a vote? I'm sorry, I know, do you need, you're doing a referral, positive
Yep.
referral to the village board
Yes.
and a positive referral to the ZBA?
correct.
Correct.
Is that a vote?
That's just a letter. It
Yes.
doesn't
Yeah.
require.
But we all, there's a consensus that
It's still a letter that's.
we'll do it.
Great, thank
If
you.
I have to.
Great, thank you, appreciate it.
Okay. So that takes care of that piece. We can adjourn the public hearing. We have to talk about the SFEIF.
Correct.
Uh,
Finding statement.
Do we want to do that now? It's not.
I only have some technical questions.
Tell you what, let's hold that
Okay.
and do the BAR stuff. Because there's a couple of
Then we can
BAR
do that.
stuff and
Yes.
what we have left, that's really planning board stuff. So let's do that. So, do we have anything new on 49 Spring Street?
We do not, that is still before the ZBA.
Okay, what about 38 James?
They are here.
I'm skipping over 175 Croton Avenue and the Children's Center because they're planning board applications.
Hi,
Do
everybody.
them together. Go ahead, you're up. Name and address.
Yes,
and
my name is
represent-
Louis Saavedra, owner of 38 James Street, Austin. I am changing the material from wood to metal structure. And that is all here.
That's it. And what is it? For the record, why did you tell us?
It's his roof design, but why don't you explain to Mr. Saavedra what you're doing?
Is it the home, is it the garage?
It's the garage. I got the variances and everything already for it.
And the color is,
It's gonna have a concrete slab, and then,
oh, is the roof in the building?
yeah, everything is gonna be metal, except the windows, of
Well,
course.
metal has a color. So is it green, yellow, purple?
It's yellow, it's gonna match my home.
Okay. And the roof will be yellow too?
The roof is brown like my home.
Brown, okay. That's what I want. All right. Any issues, folks?
We have the yellow and the brown.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay.
And is the material, I mean, what you had on your house was a vinyl, right?
Correct,
Which is through colored. You don't have to paint it.
correct.
So this, the steel siding here, is that also, how is this?
It comes painted
comes
like that.
painted?
Yes.
So is that an enamel baked on, or is that something that you have to paint from time to time? Do you know?
I'm not sure, but I know that I'm using ammo anymore.
Okay. Jesus? No. Jeff? No. Mike? John? No. Any questions, comments from the public? There being none, is there a motion to approve the site? The plan is submitted.
You'll find that missing shutter, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was
I'll
Sandy.
look for it for you.
That was Sandy.
Ah,
And there's a missing good on the side, which I put on the
I
side.
found one in my
And the side,
backyard.
so
Now I know where it goes.
okay, so you'll put the shutter back?
I'll put the gutter and the shutter.
Good. Okay.
I'll make.
Once I get that stuff
All
done.
right,
change
so we
the,
have a motion,
I'll move.
second, okay, all in favor? All right, okay,
Thank you, Mr. Saavedra.
thank you.
Thank you.
Move
Take
on
care.
to- Move on to 78 Prospect Avenue, single-family residence.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is David Arango, I'm working for Rui Arellano Architect. And we are presenting now the proposed new residence for 78 Prospect Avenue. It's a modular house, 2 floors, and it's located, if you see the map, it's on this part of the site.
Is this also a subdivision, or we did the subdivision?
There's some, I don't have a recollection of the subdivision.
Is this 2 separate tax parcels, or is there a subdivision involved?
No.
Let me introduce myself as well. My name is Otis Curtis, and I am the owner, and there are 2 contiguous properties. And this is separately deeded property that is essentially where there is a garage in a rather odd location, and then there is a house on the separate lot facing Bellevue.
So is the garage now being used by the homeowner Watson?
That is correct. No, Bellevue.
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 So what happened to the parking for the Bellevue house?
There is consideration for part of the proposed parking that there would be at least some space that could be built into the back area, and as you'll see from what we have, there's a decent amount of parking there presented, but it has heretofore not been a consideration or has not been addressed.
Okay. I think you gotta figure that out, right?
Yeah, we have the space, we have the floor plan here, we have the garage over here. This is the basement plan. And we have in the first floor, we have the family room, kitchen layout, all the social area. And the upper level, in the second floor, we have the bedrooms and things like that. Like I mentioned before, the house is a modular house. We put in like a little touch on that one, maybe like a clay, natural color with a cedar texture in the upper floor. In the first floor, we want to make a horizontal siding with the same color. We have like a white trim around it with white windows, and gutters and litter will be white too.
And you need no variance, right?
Yes, we request what variance. We are for the meeting was the previous one, but it was adjourned because there is no
Because
court.
you have the required lot size.
Lot size, we request lot size, lot width, we request side yard, and previous coverage.
Chairman, just so you know, they originally got variances granted in November of 17. They were extended in May of 18, so they will expire on November 18th of this year.
Okay, so the variances exist.
Yes, but we need to go back to the.
But they actually need 2 additional variances that
Yes.
they had not asked for before. They're looking for a driveway setback, and they're also looking for impervious coverage. Those variances had not been requested previously.
Should,
And that's because the house is bigger than the lot.
Yeah, the driveway setback is, there's a proposal that there be no setback, basically, and be a 4-foot in that zone. And the impervious coverage would be supposed to be 52.5%. But I think the concerns you raised earlier is with regards to the parking at the other
Right.
location. I think that needs to get
Well,
resolved.
you can't, you're causing an additional, in my mind, variance, because you've taken away the parking that was associated with the existing house. And so now you gotta figure out how to get that back, right?
Yes, sir.
So, so I don't really know what to do with it, because it seems like a lot of what we might approve as BAR is gonna be contingent upon what the board is going to do.
Yep.
So we should, I recommend we adjourn this until you resolve that, and I would have the discussion with the Board of Zoning Appeals as well about the problem, the situation you're creating on the Bellevue Avenue.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? Fair? All right?
Yes.
Okay? All right, we'll adjourn. Thank you. Okay, so, 77 Broadway is also...
That was dealt with in the resolution which you signed tonight, so that's taken care of.
So now we're back to the plan. Let's get back to, actually, you're not on the agenda. You probably won't. We do have a deliberation. So, okay. So you all have the SFEIS. And I reviewed this earlier and provided some comments so that you can at least start getting going. So there may be a repeat for some of you folks. Mr. Meyer, just logistical questions. I think we can go along and discuss. So, I think you all have the latest draft. You should also know that Jim and his able-bodied team has made a great first shot at this. And I think does anybody have any material questions on pages 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5?
I only have On page 5, no.
Okay. How do you feel about page 6? I think this is still a history.
One thing that we were uncertain of, at the very bottom of page 6, this comes up a couple of times, is how you came out on the parking spaces. Like we said, we think at the bottom of the last paragraph on page 6, that 3 parking spaces will be designated within the project as surface parking lot as public parking for visitors of the pavilion. These spaces could eventually be used for the Crow Bucky Preserve in the event that an easement or other agreement was granted from some of these other parties to. But I wasn't sure how you came out on the discussion. I know some people felt, don't put parking spaces there for Crow Bucky, I thought.
I think this is fine because our
Okay.
concern was we didn't want to say that the project was providing access to Carl Bucky Preserve, but this leaves it open for that eventuality if it ever comes.
Okay, and we got it right about the 3 parking spaces for the pavilion.
That one's
Yeah.
big,
Okay,
yes.
great, thanks.
All right. Let's move on to 7. Be just careful, because if you go to the very last page, see what's the sign.
So you struck through on page 7, or to page 8, area variance for building width. because-
Everybody is good on 7? Let's get
Right,
on
oh, sorry.
7. Is good on 7? Okay. So, you note, I think on page 7, the waiver of the building width, we're still deliberating on. That's either, it's the building department's call.
Right, so we'll see between now and the next meeting,
Right.
whether that will go in as a required.
Shows up on page 8 as well.
Right.
C.
C, exactly, yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
Good, John? Mike? Good on 9? Right?
Yeah, I'm going 9.
Yes.
Top of 10?
Yep, top of 10, that's okay.
Yeah, top of 10.
I believe it says in the finding, Austining master plan, I'm pretty sure we call it a comprehensive plan.
Comprehensive plan,
Yes.
right, I'll check that, I'll check that.
All right.
10, the note, police and ambulance service input to be included, do we have that?
So I think what I'm just not sure, I couldn't find anything from police and fire in the record, maybe it's something that could get, I'm sorry, not police and fire, police and ambulance. I think that's something that, unless anybody on the board has any issue about that, it's just that, I think it's just something that needs to be buttoned up.
Yeah,
that
I don't
maybe-
think they're a showstopper, but.
No, yeah, I mean, we probably
Should
can
be
get
easy to
simple
get.
letters between now and the next
Right,
meeting.
cheaper
just-
than the ambulance boys here,
It may be somewhere in this long record, I don't know, but it's something that, yeah.
but we've never seen it.
All right, so it's just a detail that needs to be buttoned up that I'm sure can be between now and
Who
the finalization.
owns that? Tracy? To get this from the ambulance and the police department? Let's just sign an owner so we know it gets done.
So I think maybe what will happen is the applicant will coordinate with either Stewart or Keller and Sessions to, sometimes, okay, they may,
The acting village
the
manager.
applicant. Yeah, I think they both, I think the applicant and whoever you assign Stewart, sorry.
Apparently our acting village manager is okay. How do we feel about page 11?
We'll just plug in, unless there's some issue you have to decide, we'll just plug into this, whatever it is they say.
So how do we handle the finding on the top of 11, considering we're still deliberating on sewer and water?
Yeah.
I think the answer is still, I think the finding is still right.
In 11, on the top of 11, did you say? On open space and recreation?
Yeah, it just says the planning board finds that the project will not result in significant adverse impact on municipal services and real estate taxes generated from the development. The project will reasonably balance the impacts of the municipal services. Right? Page
Top
11.
of 11. And
I
this-
think that's still materially correct. How those two open issues you have to do with the site plan, I think, like you mentioned, that there's some inspection of the sewers and anything that might have to happen there, and et cetera, that the village engineer pointed out recently. I don't think that
Are
that
you
affects.
talking about on the sewer?
On the sewer, yeah.
I don't think that affects the finding.
It won't affect, because
The ultimate
anything
finding.
we have to, any deficiencies in the sewer, we're gonna have to.
All right. Anybody else have any problems with page 11?
That'll come up again, and we'll talk about it.
Okay, page 12. So, I don't know how to, this is a lot of blanks to fill
Where are you now?
in. On the finding for what are we doing with the existing office?
Right, so it's, at first I wanted to make sure I got the current state of mind correct. And I don't think, unless you, I would want to know that we got that correct as to your current state of mind. I don't think you necessarily have to say anything else, except maybe if you think that this will be further dealt with in the continuation of the site plan process, to say that.
Well, I think when we get into materials of construction for this pavilion, we'll get into that, right? It'll be noted on the plan. I'm just saying the language seems right, but just above the finding. I just don't know how to write the finding.
I'm not sure I understand what really is meant by, understand based
Oh,
on
wait.
existing.
So I'm reading the old text, sorry.
No, are you reading the old text or the one
I
that
was
you
going by
amended?
where I had the yellow highlight. So somebody's ahead of me.
I'm reading that finding and I'm going.
I'm reading the
Oh.
finding that you
Finding
had,
works out pretty well.
yeah. So,
All right, I'm good. You're right.
Which
No,
one are we
Jim,
looking at?
In order to not miss anything, I was going by mine.
Okay, so we're okay?
Yep. we're
Okay,
good.
great.
Okay. So I'm looking at the one that has been redlined. Are we looking at that, all of us?
You have the one with the, it's about
Yes.
10 lines of.
Yes, okay, good. I just want to make sure that I,
Right, so just so,
Wrapped up,
Comment
further
on the
discussion
correct.
with board required.
so the applicant knows it, because they saw the final version. There was an original draft, it was reviewed by the chair.
Right.
And
Chair,
that's-
as he said earlier,
Right, right.
recommended certain changes,
I'm-
which we made. And you had seen the original.
right,
So, yes,
okay.
is the answer.
I just have
Good.
too many pieces of paper.
No, that's fine. I think I got it. So
But
based
not
on the,
enough findings.
so the only thing that I have a question about in terms of interpretation, and based on the expert evidence provided, it is in its current condition, the office building is not usable for development. The word development, I think, is the wrong word here. I think I would say, in its current condition, the office building is not suitable for, or habitable, or something along those lines. Because no one is talking about using it as development. Nobody's talking about incorporating it into the structure that you are planning to build. So I think the word development is not the right use.
Habitable is okay too, it's up to.
I think our comprehensive plan doesn't talk about the phrase is something like adaptive reuse or something like that. If it's not suitable for development, then it really is
Right.
not suitable for that purpose.
For adaptive reuse, right.
Yeah.
Right,
So
But
let's go
it-
with adaptive.
right. So
It-
in its
Or
current place.
adaptive reuse in this, in the
its
proposed.
current location and within this context of the proposal. I think that's important because that makes the phrase that comes later makes sense, that it can be moved if the proper amount of money is allocated towards it.
I think we're beyond that.
And-
Yeah.
And the
So
next
how-
sentence is open to
So
the
it
to the
is,
village.
that in its current condition, the office building is not usable or is not
How about is not suitable?
Suitable.
For adaptive reuse as part of this development, or
within,
as part of the proposed development?
as a part of the proposal.
Got
Yeah.
it? I can
Just
just
let me
tell you
get-
this,
let me get that
it's not
down.
being moved.
What's that?
It's not being
Let
moved.
me just write.
The village is not going to put any money toward moving the building.
Too bad. They've got to get a Kickstarter going real
I
fast.
can just tell you that.
All right, so
One last thing, it
Yeah.
says, well, just picking up on what Stuart just said, if the village is not, maybe just so we don't close the door forever here, it says the village may consider purchasing or relocating the building. Is the option open if, say, someone wants to form a nonprofit and take the building, that,
So maybe
So-
we should put that.
so
Yeah.
the village or another local group
Or an appropriate, appropriate.
Appropriate entity
Wait,
form
But
to
I
take
get
it or
where,
something,
I
yeah.
mean, it matter to me, but the village, as near as I can tell, has already spoken about their interest in this. If a nonprofit wants to come in and take it over, that can happen between the nonprofit and the developer.
Right, because that would involve the village.
It wouldn't involve the village.
No, but we are still also, we have an obligation to, in this draft, or in this document here, to talk about historic impact. And I think we have not. We don't have it, we don't have an obligation to talk about historic impact.
I think this sentence just says they're gonna give the building away to the village. I'm just saying we should say to the village or another appropriate entity.
We already
can
have,
accept
we
it.
could add in, we have, I'm not sure if we're reading from the same place. I'm reading the second sentence.
Yeah.
It says, as a condition of approval, the applicant has offered ownership. Is that where you all are?
I have it.
I'm not in the.
That's above findings, Jim.
It's
It's
above.
above
Oh, above
findings,
findings,
yes.
oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so if you see, it says, as a condition of approval, the applicant has offered ownership of the office building to the village, paren, or one of its agencies or related organizations. We could add, if the applicant agrees, or to a not-for-profit.
Not-for-profit.
Or, you know, to a third-party organization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, so, how long is that door open?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it has to be.
Right, I mean, it's, at some point, we have to decide.
I think you have to button this up somehow in the site plan resolution.
Yeah,
Somehow this has got to get completely liquidated in what it's going to be.
right.
At the
Why can't we
latest.
just say by the time we get to a final site plan, we'll have that determination made?
So
Yeah.
would it be wisest to make the finding broad, say, or other suitable organization, and then when we get to the site plan, we left leeway?
Yeah,
I just don't want that door to be open forever. It's
I
gotta be,
agree.
you know, when we approve the final site plan, that's what's gonna happen. If nobody wants the building, they haven't brought in their truck to haul it away by then, it's gonna go to the model that the applicant has proposed.
Right, no, I agree
All
with
right.
that too. I agree with that, but we can
We
then put
figure out
in,
how to do that.
We'll shut, then the door will get shut at that point, so
Well,
we'll
I'm okay.
And we would support that.
So,
Yeah.
so I'm going to make it for a third-party organization, one of its agencies or related organizations, or a third-party organization. But I'll put some language in. Say again?
I don't want it to go on behalf.
No, I'm going to put something in here to the effect that the final determination regarding this will be made by the board in the site plan
site plan,
process.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, just give me a second to get the note, please.
All right.
The only, I totally support that, what you're trying to achieve. I don't want it to backfire. In other words, we end up in a long protracted process and then we can't have site plan approval because we don't have a final determination. That's the flip side
What
of that.
about,
Yeah, no, I think we all agree to
can
that.
we put in a date?
If we don't have a benefactor standing up,
Can we say decided by November 3rd?
well, how do you know about that?
But just do it. because I agree with you, it can go on forever. Because
But
somebody's gonna go, I got somebody, and we gotta go do a GoFundMe. And
Yeah, but I
3
don't
years later,
think
we're
that's,
still
I
sitting
don't
around.
think, no, I don't think that's the, we still have both the boards, the village board. I mean, that process
The
goes.
village
I think at
board
this
is
point,
done.
it's probably unrealistic.
No,
If the
I'm not
village
saying-
wants no part of it, then.
I understand in terms of this, but we still have all the other parts that has to go through the process.
But I don't want this to go on forever
Neither
while
do
people
I.
socialize this thing. I mean,
Neither do I.
It's been there for 50 years. It's been in the state it's in for the 25 that
You
I've
don't
been
have
looking
to,
at
you
it.
don't have to argue
But
this.
No,
to
I'm
me.
not arguing. I'm
Yeah.
just saying that if anybody wanted to come forward, they should come forward, but we gotta have a date. Right? It's like an auction. This is the day it's gonna happen.
Okay, so why do we put a date in if we have everything else? The site plan approval is where it happens, because we have so many other things that has to be decided
And the
upon.
reason that I want the date is because those things we can easily close. Those are all in our control. But as soon as we put, or a third party comes forward, there's no end to that third party. I don't know when they're gonna show up, and it's a condition of site plan approval. And I don't know whether we can act or not, but if we say if nothing happens by the 30th of November, pick a date, January 1st, I don't really care. We pass that date, they go on with their site plan, and we get instruction and whatever.
And
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
to Chairman Singh, if a group did emerge, we would do a preliminary term sheet, which would give them that opportunity. We don't have to have a final agreement plan, but if a viable alternative arose, I think Chairman, I concur, we would have to have some type of preliminary agreement before, I would say November 27th, because I think that's your meeting date.
Here's what I'm confused about,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to listen and understand. The proposal on the table provides a mitigating component to the loss of this building, right?
Mhm.
So that's going to be a part of the site. And we want it to be a part of the site plan because to avoid unknown circumstances, either developing in a way we're unhappy with or not developing. But say at some point, some group does surface and takes the building. What, just so we're all on the same page, that does not alleviate the approval of the site plan to recreate or to provide whatever component you're proposing currently, right? Just so we're all on the same page here?
You know what, as practical matter, because we've modified the plan to reuse a lot of the original materials from the building per the village's and, encouragement, we would probably at that point have to change the design a little bit, what gets ultimately approved in the site plan or the design. But
I'm not, and I don't want to I'm not trying to
No, I
cast
understand what you're
another
saying.
picture here. I'm just trying to make sure I understand. Is that what you're insulating? Is that the scenario
There's a
you're
couple
insulating?
things you're gonna have.
we will build it, I'm being told, to clarify, we will build it regardless.
Okay.
It just,
Because that keeps it simple here.
an
I just feel like.
indication
Yeah.
should be that it just may change the design.
Won't be-
So I'll fix this, it now says or, I'll fix it to the end, or
I
and
just-
or something.
if the first thing that happens on the site is they decide to take the building down, store the material, right? I don't want any of these other sideline things that may or may not happen to preclude that, because somebody has to come forward.
That's what I'm saying. We're, to keep this simple and linear, the proposed structure that's going to be approved on the site plan is happening one way or another. Whether somebody shows up at some point, whenever that may or may not be, That's a whole other, that's on its own trajectory.
Unless there's something in here, in my mind, that says, or somebody comes forward.
But that, I feel like that makes it all fuzzy again.
Well, yeah.
We've lost the horizontal and
That's right,
vertical.
but that's the proposal.
This is-
The more ors
This is just
you
in
add-
lieu of complete demolition. So, project's gonna go forward in every way that we specify on our site plan with the pavilion. It'll either use bricks from this or not, and this building will either be demolished and carted away, or it'll be
That's it,
moved by someone else, that's
As long
it.
as it's clear.
That's different, let's keep it simple
That's
like
right.
that, and if somebody approaches us in the
That-
interim,
That's clear to me. That, but that also puts an end. The way we were talking about it, I didn't see any end.
No, I'm just
So however
saying,
you said it, I'm happy with, because at some point, that building is gonna take a new shape. Whether it takes the shape with the bricks that are in it today,
and there's almost nothing for us to deliberate one way or the other, because if someone takes that building, that's a whole separate project, they're gonna have to take it off-site.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And we don't want anything contingent upon it.
Yeah.
that's right. But that's right. If they want it, they can have it. But if we're saying, I don't know, are you comfortable with what we're trying to get here?
I'm gonna get as somebody to articulate to me exactly what, so let me, where it is now is that, I changed a little word, but I said there would be reasonable mitigation, my words, by the relocation of the building. I had said, or the reuse of its materials in the proposed pavilion. I could say, and/or the reuse of its materials in the proposed pavilion.
It's that simple.
But then I think, but then
Stop
I had,
there.
hmm?
Stop there.
So if we hear that the village has absolutely said that they will not fund this, they will not support this,
I
then
can tell you that, for
you
certain.
can tell me this, but we cannot amend this document to basically strike those lines because
Well-
it's in here.
I think what we're suggesting is we're gonna define a path
That's fine.
that makes this irrelevant, whether they come forward or not. The
So,
only relevant end manifestation is whether it is reused bricks or not.
And just one other thing. Well, once we get past this, I want to go to the last sentence of this finding, because I think this kind of relates to the reused bricks. It says, provided that a serious effort is made to reuse the building materials as discussed, the planning board finds that to the maximum extent practicable, taking into account economic considerations, impacts on historical resources will be reasonably mitigated by the relocation of the building or the reuse of its materials in the pavilion. And what we're saying is that we're not, if the building is moved, it's no longer necessary mitigation to reuse the materials in the pavilion.
Yes.
that
So-
was good.
Yeah, so I think that,
Yeah.
So is it that it will be reasonably mitigated by the construction of the pavilion, and if it should occur, the relocation of the building? If the building is not to be relocated, the effort will be made to reuse the bricks in the pavilion?
yep.
And, is that where I stop?
Full stop.
Okay,
That's simple.
all right, let me just get my note on
but it's a, well, listen to wording, what, I think, Jim, what the point is that they are, the certainty here is that you're making a finding based on us making a serious effort to reuse the materials in the pavilion. That satisfies our mitigation, and you make a finding based on that.
The pavilion is the mitigation. We're gonna find that mitigates, and then as a second step, you'll either reuse the bricks or the building will be taken away.
Correct.
So,
I like that.
And-
And that's all between us and any
you'll
Yeah.
figure
third
out where
party
you find
entity.
in other words, if the building is taken away, you're relieved of the obligation to reuse
To
the
read,
bricks.
that's the only issue, but the pavilion is
But it's
our
still gonna look like the
mitigation.
design.
Right.
That's
Right? Still gonna look like the design.
Well,
As vetted
we don't
in
know
the
that,
site
we
plan
haven't
process.
had an architectural review of that, of the pavilion yet,
Well,
right?
Well, we-
So,
At some point, it's gonna,
it will be, but yeah, but that's not what we're
I
looking
know,
at
well,
now.
that's why we're gonna look at site plans. Okay.
that. Now, I'm sorry, but I'm going to bore on you with that. Is I understand that I can say something like, the mitigation will be construction of the pavilion, and if the pavilion is not to be relocated, then the pavilion will use the bricks.
It's not just the bricks, will make a good faith, a serious good faith effort to reuse materials. It wasn't bricks,
Just it's-
we're using more than
Architectural
bricks.
Okay, I
elements,
didn't
yeah.
understand that.
I
All
think
right.
we're using
Bricks and
bricks
other
as
material.
shorthand for.
Okay, all
And
right.
architectural
Yeah.
detail for that one.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, if you looked at what we sent you all, I mean, we've expanded, we're using
Yeah.
more than the bricks.
Right,
But,
All right.
all right.
So
but
am I still saying that the applicant has offered to provide the building to the village or third parties? Okay.
yes,
All
but
right.
then I think this condition would require the applicant to cooperate with the village to pursue potential grant money. That will not, that has to be either amended or, that's up further. It's not in the findings.
Would
but
also
if-
require the applicant to the village or pursue
So if-
potential.
if
Right,
we-
so that's gonna,
That has to change.
should I take that out?
I don't know.
There's language that says this condition, which was the moving of the building, would also require the applicant to cooperate with the village in pursuing potential grant monies. It sounds like that's not happening from what Stuart said.
Right, so we should,
Take it out.
So should I
Take it
strike
out.
that?
Strike it, take it out.
yeah.
One thing I don't,
And I think the second sentence, the last sentence before the finding is, suit the village or another entity not accept ownership of the office building. The applicant has agreed to salvage bricks from the office building for reuse in the construction of the pavilion.
And it says bricks there, but maybe we should just broaden
Yeah,
it.
not
Yes,
just
that-
bricks,
Yeah, It should be
architectural details
Materials.
and materials, yeah.
okay, hold on.
I just think that this is. Exactly. Right. That makes it go on break.
What does?
Or third party.
Who says?
We should, I mean, that should, if somebody comes to the applicant and says, I want this building, should have at it. But we're saying, or somebody else comes forward. I don't know by when.
But it was equally open-ended with the village
No,
here.
the village is deciding.
But no. As it was written here, it's no different whether it was the village who was going to step up to the plate or anyone else. There's
maybe
no
this-
time limit
Maybe
on
this will
this
provide a way to
word.
close it. Stuart, would the village wants no part of itself being involved in moving it. If a suitable entity came forward, would the village, could we word it so that it says a suitable third party approved by the village board? And then, that way it's not like someone
Village
out of
board,
left field
at
comes in.
that
they
point,
don't-
Jeff, the village board's not gonna get involved, because it's not
Yeah,
theirs.
who's gonna determine?
I think
That's-
if a suitable third party comes up, the applicant
They can
comes
be approved by
here
the
with
board.
that person, and they say, look, planning board, we got somebody who wants this building.
Yeah.
And they're gonna take it away, and by the way, this is what the pavilion is gonna look like now because the building's going away. I mean, the building can go away, so you wanna be, you get the bricks and build a house. There's nothing that says they're gonna take this thing and make it a station stop along the Hudson River.
But can we just agree to say or other third party, and then we'll just, with an understanding that when time comes to approve the site plan, at the end, that's the end. No, if
That's
there's no
village
one,
law.
that's it.
And I'm fine with the clock, but this, I believe, stands separately from any site plan. Right?
No, it
Because the
stands
mitigation-
separate, but once they get
mitigation
this-
all these other mitigations happen to make the site plan happen. The one that doesn't happen is the proposal of waiting for a third party. That's all I'm saying, is if we don't need the third party, because if the third party shows up, somebody's gonna come forward. I mean, I don't know why we have to get a third party that may or may not arise complicated in this finding. But
I think
that's
it
just
just,
me. John?
I think it just memorializes their commitment to give it to someone else,
And I do
that they made
think,
here.
I also do think that we have to do that. I mean, we don't have anyone from the Historic Preservation Commission here now. But we do have, it is,
And let's do backwards, so what I don't wanna do is keep a site plan open forever. So if you can say by the time, this is done, by the time the site plan is approved.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it's not contingent upon this third party
we
showing.
want them to move forward. If we
I
approve it, we want them to move forward.
I don't want
Yeah.
some future board to sit here and go, well, you guys said that, the third party could come in. But this could go on forever.
Or even possibly more practical, we do this, you vote on this, all of a sudden a third-party entity approaches us and says, we want to negotiate something, and you all say, well, then let's wait and delay issuing final site plan approval, let's see how these negotiations.
So how do we craft this that
That's
doesn't
the
make
issue.
the third party a contingent for approving the site?
Maybe we could just say that.
Okay, we add a sentence
I like it.
that says, this condition, the third party condition is not a condition of site plan. I think everybody understands what that means, right? At least,
The door will be closed once we approve the site plan.
See, I had been drafting a final determination regarding the relocation of the office building will be made by this board prior to issuance of a resolution of site plan approval. Now you want me to add,
I think what you wrote is really leaves the door,
okay,
so I don't want to leave the door.
so maybe,
We're
or
not
say,
leaving the door
Why
open.
not?
Yeah,
That one little sentence, it's got to be, the site plan will drive the end of third-party consideration.
I think that would just happen as a practical matter. We don't even need to say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
all right, I was drafted, okay, I'll
I,
stop.
I think
So
what
read
you,
back what you just said, Jim, while you're there.
What I just said was, a final determination regarding the relocation of the office building will be made by this board prior to issuance of a resolution of site plan approval. I felt that even left you the option to do it at an earlier meeting if you decide to. And the question is, am I going to say anything further about it being or not being a condition of approval?
So that, you're comfortable with says that at the final site plan, all this third party who may or may not be doing GoFundMe,
I can't say that because I think under what I wrote, you probably still could put some kind of condition. So if you want, I could say words to the effect that the determination, this determination, which will be made prior to site plan approval, or the site plan approval, this determination will be finalized at or before the site plan resolution. The site plan resolution will not contain a condition regarding it, if you want me to.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I need to see it because what I'm hearing is,
Michael, you'll see the draft. I
yeah,
promise,
if
okay?
somebody, we get into a negotiation and it must be done for site plan approval, it could just,
Well, let me just say what I'm committed, if,
I hear what the intent is, let us
Yeah.
work on language,
Yeah.
I hear it. In other words, you're saying is, look, if something comes up, you don't want to preclude us from doing this, but you're okay with the pavilion, you're okay with it reusing the materials, and that is the mitigation that you find is adequate to address this. But you don't want to preclude that if something did come up, we can do it, but it's not a condition. So I think we can, I think that's what I'm hearing, and that
I
works.
think that's right. I just don't want to have this hung up because somebody walks in and goes, oh boy, right? Even as you described, preliminary, agreements, and then they have to go to a GoFundMe for a year.
Yeah, and you say, well, then we can't do final site plan approval because we have to let the process play out.
Right.
That's,
Okay, so you guys know what we
all
are.
right.
Okay.
Grades. Did we cross over 13?
No, well, we're doing it now.
So I'll say on sewer, we've had some action on sewer between the last meeting and this meeting, but I think what I heard so far in this meeting is that some language will go in here. As much as we can know about that, by the time we finalize this, we'll go in, and the county said something about it in there. But the bottom line is going to be that the applicant will be required to make the improvements to the system that are necessary to handle their building.
Right.
And,
Based upon, it just almost pulled out of their memo, based
Whatever.
upon CV, television,
whatever's
inspection,
needed, whatever, yeah. So,
Take it right out.
and I think gas and electric is kind of a check-off like police, and then maybe we'll get letters or something.
So, finding 4.9 on page 14, okay?
So, just a technical thing, you know, this Westchester government letter is referring to Reed Silver, and I think they're just behind,
Right, they're behind.
but
Yeah.
that has no impact on.
No,
it.
yours,
Right.
yours will trump theirs.
Yeah.
Okay. That's page, you on page 15? Is that page 15? Okay, the two findings on 15, you okay with both of them?
So are you on, did you leave 14?
I think we're done with.
So the only question we had was on page 14 was and that was, kind of brought that up before, on this 4.9, that we didn't want to we may not be able to make a final decision on which road, the west of, I mean, both are approved by you. We both want to do the west, we both prefer the west, but it may not be finalized
Well,
during the,
but you have the current plan, which is, that
We-
runs through the middle, right?
we have both plans
But-
have been evaluated, technically evaluated, and approved technically.
And they both meet the 30-foot right-of-way, 12-foot lanes, and a 4-foot sidewalk. Right?
Yeah, they'll all
Yes.
consist of sidewalk. We just want the ability to pivot potentially after site plan if, for whatever, for
So
some
the words I
reason.
used, I fudged it a little bit in the second paragraph by saying the applicant is expected to reach a conclusion on the role of alternatives, thinking that
Oh,
when we get
okay,
down, when we get
okay.
down to the
I think.
As long as that's
final
understood,
text,
we have the
We'll see
ability.
where we are,
Fine. I could live with that.
I'm okay with that, because I think the whole purpose of this part is to demonstrate you have appropriate access. One way or the other,
I'm fine with that.
all right? Okay. So now we go to 15. Jeff?
I'm good.
You do 15? Okay.
Joe, just a quick question. Are we addressing the affordable housing in here? Is there going to be a paragraph for that? I know I was not here last month. Was that something that we talked about? Are we handling that in the downstream version of the resolution, or?
Well, in the final resolution, the site plan will be in there as one of the
Right,
requirements
just,
in terms of
something
number of
kind of
units.
further expanding on the affordable housing, the makeup of it, more detail on it, that kind of thing.
I guess part, Michael, might also depend upon, we have to get the board of trustees to grant the special waterfront permit, because that drives the density, which would then drive the number, but
I mean,
I guess we could put something in there.
Yeah, we were talking about 14 units that were going to be affordable.
Are we talking about conditional approval? Sort of say something there?
I know a few months back, we kind of spoke about affordable housing at some length. I just didn't know if that needs to be in here, or,
So it's not required to be, it can be. It can, if it's not here, you're not precluded from saying something about it in your site plan resolution.
Where would this go, where would it go in here?
I
I'm
think we have
sorry,
to
what
say-
are you suggesting, what language? I'm sorry.
I know a few months ago, we spoke, in detail about the affordable housing, how many units it would be. We didn't really kind of finalize, type of unit, it would be all one bedroom, two bedroom, some of that sort of thing. And then again, maybe some of that's gonna get worked out in the site plan.
That's an interesting question. I've never thought about that as part of an environmental review, but it's sort of, some point when you say consistent with the social, economic, and essential other considerations. It struck me that a sentence that just says that, we recognize the inclusion of affordable housing.
For example, that we have a subsection 4.2, demographics and community facilities. We could add open space and rec, police and fire. We could add a 4.2.4 and say affordable housing, and just say the applicant has proposed affordable housing and the details, something that it'll be.
Right, because doesn't that count toward density bonus and some
Yes.
other things too, so.
Okay, so we'll, add a 4.2.4,
And-
which will acknowledge that it's part of the proposal and so forth.
And I believe, Michael, there's specific criteria with respect to building those. They have to be mainstream, proportionate
Right.
amounts and mainstream and quality in your code. So if you want to say, and it will be built in accordance with section, whatever it is in the code.
Excellent. All right.
Okay.
And proud to do that.
Okay, so I think, I had a question on the condition about parking, but I understand now that I'll sync it up with what we said about the car parking. And know there might be a little more tightening necessary on that in the site plan process as to the discussion that was had about assignment of spaces to particular, I think that can be handled in site plan. As to whether individual units are gonna have spaces assigned to them or not, that whole discussion. I don't think that has to be finalized here. I wanted to thank Keller and Sessions for their help in preparing this as well.
They were great. I just wanted to clarify one thing. There's a number of comments, like L, that, the treatment and ultimate visual effect of rock cutting will be subject to prior review by the BAR or will be resolved during the site plan process. There's a number of those. I'm assuming most of these, if not all of these, most of these issues, the great majority of these have already been addressed in the various site plan drawings and the like. The way I'm interpreting that language, when you say will be clarified in the BAR or will be resolved during the site plan process, is, aside from the issues that I raised earlier, I'm assuming that what you're talking about is those issues will be flushed out in the site plan resolution. Because,
So I'd have to go.
because they've all, most of them have
Yeah.
already been,
That particular
almost all of
one,
them have been dealt with.
that particular one, I agree the language was a little soft, and the reason is that I was not certain, and I talked about this with Council Sessions, whether, the way I understand it, and I may be wrong, but you may not know for certain which treatment of that cut
Till we get
you're
out
going
there.
to
and
employ till site plan is already done and you get out there. I may be wrong about this, my thought was that there was a fully developed visual of how that would look if it's the more gradual cut that the board would prefer, but not so fully.
No, it's the
No, we
other
have
way
already
around.
made that
It's the opposite.
determination.
Whatever one you prefer.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, you want the gradual or the more steep?
We want the
The more
steeper.
steep natural cliff.
Natural.
Yes.
All right, you may need to understand this more, but I thought one of the alternatives was quite fully developed. The other, if they had to go to it, might need a little bit, well, how is the finished product going to look on the other alternative? And I may be wrong, but that's why I thought we can
I mean-
figure that out in the site plan.
But that, yeah, and that's my only point, that I didn't really raise a lot of those issues when it talks about will be resolved during the site plan, only because I think we, as you're saying, we've resolved those issues.
Right.
They just need to be reflected in the site plan resolution. You know, we
Yeah.
flushed that out.
Yeah, so
I
if
just
that-
didn't want to think that there's another whole process
Right,
ahead of resolving these, that they've been resolved.
fair enough.
They just will get reflected in the site plan resolution.
Yep.
Okay.
And how they own that rock is subject to our village ordinances, right?
Right,
And-
yeah.
And I mean, that
You don't
cannot,
have to say that in the.
it could also be, I mean, just as much as landscaping, it's almost the finished look of it is part of the
You know-
landscaping issue, but that's a different.
But that gets
This
spelled
This is
out.
probably all done. I mean, you know, you can have retaining walls that have these pins and anchors sticking out of them that are not attractive, or they can be done with certain treatments. It may already be there and I wasn't aware. I'm just trying to call it to your attention and make sure that the final treatment is signed off on whichever
Right.
alternative.
And I think that it should be, because we don't really know as we go in whether you do need to underpin something or whether you may have to do more gradual cutback.
Yeah, I
But-
think it should
But if
be,
we can
it
put
should be
language in that says that
outlined
those
in the
decisions come down
conditions
the
of
line.
site plan.
Yeah.
Agreed.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on.
All right.
So I'll make the changes and get a redraft out in the next week or so. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
look into it.
So let's move on to Avalon Bay. Still here, thank you. You're staying.
No, you don't. You didn't tell me. Oh, for yourself?
Yeah, but you just,
Yeah, because we don't have any,
you were gonna say.
Okay, can you give me 2 minutes?
Yeah, take your
Yeah,
time.
has to like reboot, yeah.
Okay, I apologize.
That's okay. I didn't take what, you know, whatever you said before, though. Everything else, okay.
Completely out of the loop.
It's hard to do. It's hard to hear.
she must, how you doing with hearing? You
It's
hear it?
very hard to hear you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Almost impossible to hear you, but,
Yeah, because that goes over the.
No.
This is only for the camera and for the. Yeah.
would I be able to move over?
Yeah,
here?
please.
Come closer. Thank
Maybe she did hear it.
you. That would be great.
You would think, I know what you're thinking, I can see the words in the bubble above your head.
That's okay, I got it.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
It does.
Can you hear me?
I'm healing and tethering and.
You have to speak close. And you're gonna push.
That's to be turned on.
And that too. And yes, it
To go into entertainer mode,
Yeah.
All right,
you're here all week.
okay, what do we have left? One, is Maple Lodge on here?
No.
Campus, 1938.
I don't think you have any.
Are we doing that one?
That's nothing, because it's going to EAC, so there's nothing to do. Doesn't, no.
Look, we have this letter that's.
You've done that? It's just site plan on which you've already.
No, I don't have my copy.
It's not on there.
Yeah.
We got all that.
Was there a copy now?
No, that came in your packet.
Oh, I got it.
Avalon.
No, you don't
need it.
You don't need it.
Okay. Not quite. You should figure out how to weave commercials.
Okay. All
We're good
right.
to go.
Are we good? Okay, so Avalon Bay Community.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Annie Klein, and I'm an associate at Del Bello, Donnell, and Weingart, and Wise and Whitaker in White Plains. With me this evening is my colleague Peter Wise and Lindsay Romano from Avalon. We provided you a letter with the additional information you requested from last month's meeting, and we're happy to go over that and answer any questions that you have. I would like to address the letter that the County Planning Board provided on September 17th. The increased density for the project was not contingent on the shuttle bus service. It was based on Avalon offering 17 affordable units, which allowed us to get a bonus of 17 market rate units. And the donation of the 8 acres to the village for open space allowed the density to increase from 6 units per acre to 8 units per acre. So as I said, we're happy to answer any questions.
The $100 per month charge, with, I don't know if you or the people with you can explain what process you used to arrive at $100 per month. Was that based on, the cost to provide the service at an expected number of riders? If you had more riders, could you reduce the cost? Can you just give the history of that?
Hi, Lindsay Romano with Avalon Bay. I don't have the exact history. I could get that information, but what we typically go through with any sort of service that we're offering to our residents is we look at similar communities with like services that we're offering, and we go through and do a comparable analysis. We could potentially, I guess if the ridership was increased, it could offset the cost, but it by no means, we have 2 people enrolled currently, so to offset the $60,000 to $70,000 a year charge for the shuttle, you'd have to have ridership increase pretty dramatically, and there just isn't the demand of the community, unfortunately.
So the demand is certainly the interesting part. Because it appears that parking at the Austin Railroad Station is significantly more advantageous to your tenants than for you to provide the shuttle. That's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is, I don't have any idea how many of your residents actually go to the train station and consume those spaces, because the purpose, quite frankly, was for this development to not have it, of the shuttle, is to not create a significant adverse impact on the already difficult parking we have. So new developments are required to provide shuttles. So I don't, quite honestly, I don't have an answer to yes or no, because it appears to me that even by the standards of the Work Club, Mystic Point, you are even more underutilized than they are. And I think I said this 2 or 3 years ago when one of your colleagues showed up and said, nobody uses my shuttle. That's because it's too expensive. And you need to figure out how to make it less expensive, because the whole point of the shuttle was to reduce the impact on the community. And what you've done by the $100 is increase the impact on the community. So I think you gotta go back and figure that out.
Well, the majority of the residents do work in the Westchester area, of those that provide demographic information to us. They're not required to provide that. So of the ones that we have information, only 12% of the residents work in New York City. All of our residents already have cars.
So what you tell
there's
me,
that.
so for example, if tomorrow you decided this shuttle was free, you still couldn't fill the bus.
I think given it's an apartment community, people move, every couple of years, they have their cars, they're comfortable with that part of their commute. I would say with the other residential communities that have the shuttle, they're condominium communities. So the cost of the shuttle is part of their HOA fees, which they're required to pay, so it's baked into a larger HOA fee. So it's not a participatory shuttle, it's, you have to pay for it
But
regardless
that's
of use or not.
that's your business model, right? If I were to go to some of the older apartments in Austin, their heat is included in their rent, their water is included in their rent,
Yeah.
right? So you're not telling me anything that's interesting to me, that makes me feel like you have the right answer. So, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I'm just not getting that any of this data supports us. So I think you have to do a better marketing job. I think you have to talk to your management team and figure out how to reduce the cost so it's competitive with the people who are parking in our
Yeah,
space.
I mean, from our understanding, we can't reduce the shuttle costs, and other communities that are utilizing shuttles, the shuttle companies don't even want to provide the service anymore because it's not cost effective for them. So I think it would be hard for us to find a service that was less expensive than the one we have now. You know, we can always talk about marketing it, although we do market it currently.
What if you said, you know what, there's an overhead for me, and you're gonna go to the train station, and every day at 6:30, there's an Uber. It's $8. And you put 4 people in the Uber, and they go. Still cheaper than your $70,000.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's opportunities with Uber. You know, at our Great Neck community, we did offer a reduced Uber fare for our residents to help them offset the cost, and we could look to do that
Our goal
here.
is to reduce the traffic, one, on the street, 2, reduce the parking in our village train station parking. So I think you need to tell me how you're gonna fix that, because right now you just say, well, we're gonna abandon this idea, and the people will have to fare for how they wanna fare. You know, what's fascinating to me is that more and more companies, in order to attract employees, are actually paying for their way to get to work.
Yeah, no, you see that with Google and a lot of the tech companies. You do.
So anyway, I don't know what the board feels like, but I clearly am not ready to make this.
Can you describe the program you mentioned at your Great Neck?
So yeah, there's an Uber discount where we provide a 15% discount to the residents. So it's just to help alleviate the cost of that, and we have a relationship with Uber. I don't exactly know the inner workings of it, but that's my understanding of the service that
So
we
is
offer to them.
Sort of like you end up subsidizing a portion of the ride.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's the challenge here. I mean, when we approved this several years ago, Lyft, Uber, these things didn't even exist. So if sort of this innovation happens, you know,
Yeah.
irrespective of how we look at a site plan or think about impacts to the community, but I think if there's an intent by the applicant to try to weave these new types of services or technologies into replacing a traditional, what we maybe think of as a trolley or a shuttle. I mean, I think we have to be
That's not,
open-minded.
but that's not the proposal.
You framed the picture correctly, and I concur with the noble notions that we set out upon here. I'm concerned that at some point we can't force the right answer if the free market doesn't participate. And the free market is on both sides. It's the residents and community members and the property owners and managers. But I do think there's an emerging alternative for a logical reason. And you've identified it. And so, as a part of this evening's narrative, are you suggesting what's the commitment toward pursuing this newer alternative method that, at least to me, feels like it has a much better chance to succeed than frankly a fairly outdated model that we can see in other adjacent communities is only marginally successful also? So there's a pattern. So,
Yeah,
maybe I
mean,
missed the part where you were suggesting what the next step was for Avalon.
so we only have two residents of the 168 that are currently enrolled in the shuttle. As an attempt to offset the transitional, taking away of the shuttle and getting people used to that going away, the intent was to offer the Uber discount for the remainder of their lease, and anyone that was living at the property for the remainder of their lease. And then the thought would be that would go away when the new lease started, when someone else moved in, or new lease event occurs, to
And-
offset the transition. That was our initial intent internally that we discussed.
And, I'm sorry.
No, so that would mean that there would not be any initiative to do some kind of discount service, as if we allowed this program to terminate. I'm just,
Yeah,
because
no,
you're
I
saying in
mean,
your
it
letter.
was more in an effort, because I think the board had come to us and said, what are you going to offer in place of
Right.
taking this away? So we didn't want to leave these people who were used to using the shuttle with no alternative option.
Understood.
But if new people move in without that, they wouldn't
But
necessarily
you're
have lost
also
the service.
you're also mentioning in your letter here that you reached out to the other condo buildings, and the response was they would have to go back to their boards.
Yes.
So I would prefer to see that you actually continued that conversation, because yes, they are condos and you are not, but try to continue that conversation and see if that can be, something can be brokered. And I'm completely agreement that, the commissioner's letter is a very hopeful letter that we all like to see in the future, that we had a microbus system and all of that is taken care of via public-private funds, all of that. But that's not an immediate solution. But maybe an intermediate solution would be to try to broker more with the condos that are in the vicinity. Continue that effort. I think just to let it drop and say, we're going to service the few that still have a contract with us, and then it's a free-for-all for everyone else. That is not what we want, and I think we can't, I couldn't condone that from a place of what it is that we're trying to do with transportation.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would make the statement that we feel it's burdensome for us to have to coordinate with two different condo boards and go through votes with each of them individually. It's just, that's not how we operate.
So it's interesting, so I used your numbers. So at $70,000 a year and $16 round trip, we can do about 2,400 round trips for $35,000. You save $35,000 by paying an Uber cab for whoever wants to go for a year. You cut your cost of living. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, there's
So
implications on managing that
the real deal is,
offer.
you just want to save the $70,000 and not consider the impact on the community that you're already having, right? Because if you were willing to pay the Uber costs, we might get a few of the people who are driving themselves in the train station now to take it another way.
Mr. Chairman, Peter Wise, I had the pleasure of working with you and this board as we brought this project through to its fruition. I hear what you're saying, but I don't think it's fair to say that we're not considering the impact on the community. I mean, we wouldn't be here if we weren't in a situation where there are only two people using the service. So everything's got to be looked at in the right context.
I just want to stop you. You're right, except that it's costing them $1,200 a year if they take your service, and $400 a year.
I understand
if they park in
that.
our lot. So
I
it's
understand.
enormous.
But
it's an
the
enormous
question is,
gap.
what can we do to solve
So
that?
that's not a balance.
What can we do to
I
solve
just gave
that?
you one alternative. The board gave you two others.
Well,
None of them do I hear any real exercise of effort to go figure out how to do it. It's the simple solution is, we'll just stop it. That's what this board is here. We're just gonna stop it. And those two people will go figure out what the other people are doing. that's not what the intent was since you were.
I
there from the
understand that,
beginning,
No,
right?
and I participated with you in that discussion.
And by the
I
way,
recall.
it's a standard thing that we require for all of these multi-unit developments. So imagine for a moment, next month, they all start to show up. Say, well, you did it for them. You've come up with no reasonable alternative except stop.
But if it also happens to be the case that, as Mr. Fry said, if the model isn't working, then it's not that it isn't working.
Come up with a new model. There's two of them that just came out of this whole discussion. I just don't see any effort except stop. And that's not innovative. It's not keeping up with the times. It's certainly not keeping up with the demographic that you actually attract, right? Believe me, I know all about it.
Well,
And I think you need to think harder.
I mean, I think we just heard about the model that they have at another community that seems to work with Uber, or some sort of ride-sharing program. I mean, maybe what we can hear is instead of a proposal, and you may not be able to commit to this tonight, but may have to do something, you look at the numbers, but come back to us with a proposal that works financially for you, that you're not, it's not $70,000 in the hole every year, but you're providing this other method. And so, I know you mentioned like tapering Uber off for the current users, but maybe you can come back with a proposal that, or different variety of proposals that would subsidize riders on a permanent basis who live in the community or something like that.
Listen, and you're right, we won't be able to commit to it tonight. I mean, Lindsay will have to speak to her team. I mean, Avalon, as you know, is a public company. And she has people that she has to speak to before we commit to it.
I mean, it has, and as Chairman Park said, it has to be relationship to actually paying for a parking spot that they may not be able to get. But there is a huge difference in cost.
Well, I understand that. I understand that. I mean, but again, I don't want to leave here with misimpression. I mean, as I said, I mean, not everybody on this board went through the process with us, but it was a very collaborative process with this board, and it's been a very successful project, and there's a lot of good things that came out of it. So we don't want to leave you with the impression that we're just coming here and trying to just step all over the village. That's not what we're trying to do.
And I don't think anybody believes that. I just think that we all think that there could be one more turn to crank it out.
And I appreciate that.
Okay, some innovation that you may set the tone for. You just spent an hour and a half listening to a developer that's about to sit here who's going to have the same problem.
And also, if this can be extended to all the residents, and maybe they won't all take advantage of it, then we're capturing, we're capturing this for more residents, as opposed to only having a very small sliver utilizing something like that.
Quite frankly, it turns into a real amenity.
Yeah, I understand.
It's like daycare. Everybody uses it, but everybody thinks it's a great idea.
I understand.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we can get some more information
Great.
from our
Thanks
other
for your
communities.
Yeah, we'll consider, and hopefully see you
Great.
next month.
Super, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good night. We'll adjourn this. 175 Trucking and Route 2000. Is anybody here for one? Okay, that's right. I've never been. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is William Simeo-Paredes. I'm the architect of the project. Last month we were here and the board had a few comments and requests. I believe they submitted actually a revised site plan. The major change on the site plan was relocating the entrance of the driveway to avoid relocating the utility pole. So now the pole stays where it is and the entrance is east of the crosswalk. We also added a few more, let's say, green area, shrubbery along the existing building to minimize some of the blacktop between the two structures. Basically, that's the site changes. And then the major change was actually the building itself. I took the advice of the chairman and convinced the owner to go and do a duplex unit, so basically like a townhouse type. So now if you look on the screen there, there's two, it's still two-bedroom units, but they're duplexes, side by side, exactly the same layout, and they have their individual entrances. On the ground level, if you want to go to the next page, there is an entrance with garage. Actually, the other change is the front. No, that's the old design.
Thank you for reminding me.
Actually, I want her to see the floor plan. It's SK1B.
SK1B? B, oh, B?
B.
This one?
No, go on.
Okay, here we go. That one?
There you go. Is that the, yes, that's the latest one. If you look at the ground floor plan, the other major change is the unit facing Croton Avenue, which is the bottom unit, was changed to a one-car garage instead of a two-car garage. We needed the extra space for additional stairs. Now both units have their own stairs. They have their own entrance with laundry and mechanical room, a couple of closets and built-ins. And as you go up, you enter into basically the kitchen, dining, breakfast area. Cabinets run along the dividing wall, demising wall, and a half bath. And towards the front of the first unit is Croton Avenue. It's an open living room, dining room, condo type unit. And again, mirror image in the back. I did add a balcony on both of those units off the dining room. Upstairs, as you continue up, it's also, again, the two-bedroom, a hall bath that serves the one-bedroom, and then there's a master suite with its own bathroom and a couple of closets. So that was the major change on the floor plan itself. And if you go to SK1C, that'll be the elevation that we just saw a few seconds ago. That's the old one. And that, let's stay here for 1 second. That, if you notice, the old one had more brick, and I think one of the members on the board asked to tweak it a little bit, so I revised, removed a lot of the brick, kept the brick along the base, the foundation wall itself, and simplified the elevation facing the existing structure on the other side. I guess the Victorian type building next door, the stucco building. And added a couple of gables instead of one gable in the middle, just to separate the two units to make it look more like a townhouse development. The other elevation really hasn't changed much, other than placement of the windows. If you want to go to SK1D. This one? Yeah. Yes, so the one to the left faces Croton Avenue. It's a little simplified from the previous design. The roof is removed, the balcony is added, there's still a simple gable, and the rear is basically the same scenario. The windows in the garage are slightly smaller, and that was the only change on the back. So basically, those are the revisions based on the board's comments of last month.
You still have the 4 cars, right? Two
We still have 5 total cars, 4 is required, so we don't need variance.
Okay.
Is it a raised planter?
What was that?
I didn't want to. Is it a raised planter between the two doors? Is that under the overhang? I'm looking at. I see
Yeah, that is a raised planter.
It's a raised planter, but it's under the
Right.
overhang. Okay.
It's a very shallow, just to break up the brick.
Yeah.
I think one of the members mentioned to add some more green. It's along that house, also along the existing structure. If you
Right.
look.
Which one is the site plan? You know what we're talking about?
The old site plan.
Which one? 2.
1A is a site plan. I can't see, is that the old, no, that's the new.
That's the new one.
Yes. So if you notice, the driveway shifted down, so now the utility pole is going to remain. I convinced the owner to leave it. Now, I mean, I understand the cost was, I think we said like 50 or 70, but it wasn't a cost issue. It's really dealing with Con Edison that we were trying to avoid. So it's a little tighter, but it is away from the crosswalk as the previous design was. It works.
It's a big improvement.
Very big, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. definitely.
Questions from the board?
Colors, finishes, are we handling that under VAR? Or?
We're doing VAR.
We have CAR on here tonight, so we're doing through
I
them
think,
every one.
I don't know, she has the 3D rendering, the old drawing, but it's gonna be vinyl up on top, it's cedar shakes, vinyl, it looks like shakes basically, and horizontal clapboards on the bottom. The color was gonna be what they call sand, taupe color. I don't think you have it there, but I have a picture if you have it.
Is there room in the budget for hardy board rather than vinyl?
Well, I could ask him, but I know what he's gonna tell me. Actually, it's also a modular structure, and to do that would require them to do it on site. Westchester Modular doesn't do it, so it's an added expense, not just for the siding, but for the labor.
I do think that, so, before I realized this had evolved in the way it has, and again, I think it's a big positive. I'm sitting at Austin Pizzeria and I'm looking around that intersection and I'm like, what are the common elements here? It's primarily stucco, right? Roosevelt Square, the existing Queen Anne house, the house that sort of sits forward of that is mostly stucco. Austin Pizzeria, the gas station that sits on the corner. And I'm not suggesting a stucco house here,
No.
but I am suggesting that at least the opportunity for the siding, when you say sand, if sand is in the family of that stucco range that populates that corner, or that intersection. And then, in the end, it's gonna be about the color of the brick. And I'm not, that brick can go in a lot of directions.
Yes.
And I hope it goes in the right direction, since we don't have samples here tonight. Whatever that right
We could
direction may or may
provide
not be.
Well, I mean, the resolution could include a conditional use, a conditional phrase saying that you need to see the brick prior to, if you want to see.
I think it's such a prominent location that I feel
I'm
like.
thinking more of
we
a
want to see
common
the
brick, brownish red. I know they come in different shades.
Well, that's the proposal here.
Right here.
Yeah. The existing building is a gray stucco, right?
Well, he's not.
Yeah, it's unfinished, it's stucco, basically.
It's a grayish
So have you thought
cement.
about,
But that building was, that building was not originally a stucco building.
Which one?
The original.
Adjacent lot that were,
The
basically
mansard,
the
the building with the
Victorian type
mansard
house
roof,
there.
which is.
That was a clapboard structure originally.
It may have been, and it likely
I took a
was,
look and
but
you could tell.
today.
Today it is.
Today, half of Croton
Today, as I
Avenue
sit
is
at
stucco.
Austin Pizzeria and gaze across at that building, it's stucco.
Yeah.
so is your client married to brick? Would it be stucco for the base?
Actually, no, he's not married to brick. He would probably,
Seems like it's a simple.
he would want to do stucco, probably. I don't know.
I
would
think
like to
that's
do
the
it.
right move.
You think
frankly.
so?
Yeah.
I'm not so sure.
I prefer brick.
Well, then it depends on the brick you're
Yeah.
it's not gonna be.
Actually, I believe on that drawing, that planter that I showed was a stucco planter, just to
I-
throw a little bit in there. But
Yeah, it's more of a brown earth color.
it's unfinished stucco.
I mean, if you spin around and you look at the Wells Fargo Bank, it has kind of
A brick.
a blend, that
Yeah.
blendy brick
Yeah.
that, was
Actually, next door, the
probably uber groovy for that style of building, but,
Roosevelt Square is also brick, but it's painted white now.
yeah, but you see the point of the,
Things that are painted over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you spend, so anyway, I don't want to talk you out of the brick. I just feel like that brick is either going to be successful or it's going to be not. There's not much in between. I think
It's safer to go with.
that example is unique to that building, and I think you leave it there.
Can we just request to see samples and approve samples?
Well, that's what
I mean,
I'm suggesting.
it is gonna be a phase break, right? Or you're gonna be a full break?
No, it's a full break.
It's a full break.
I think the idea of bringing in a sample of the vinyl siding, the roofing, and the brick is the right next move. Okay?
That's fine.
But it's a big leap forward in a lot of
Well,
ways.
it's
Yeah.
very plain.
Right.
Now, what do you got? Is that a brick, is the garage brick?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
good point.
That is, right.
Okay. I think we know where we're going here. Thank you.
Thank you. What? Can, since the applicant has made such a significant effort with really redesigning the project
Yeah.
to come back, and I'm comfortable with all of the components from the site plan point of view, the massing point of view, the parking point of view, the building, conceptual elements other than the final finish. Would we be comfortable approving this contingent upon confirming the final finish?
So, if this were actually a site plan, that probably works. But this is really the BAR, so that's really the elements. But that's just me.
Well, we can approve site plan.
Yeah, it's
so
both,
wait
right?
to-
Is there a site plan?
It's a subdivision. Yeah, full thing. And I think,
I mean, the issue really is that you would want to go to the next step, and, I mean,
he's got to pick out the brick anyway.
Well, the subdivision, it's worded here, it says site plan, subdivision, but,
But we can approve the subdivision.
Done.
we could,
yeah.
I mean, we can do that. That we should do.
yeah.
Right? No reason not to do the subdivision.
You can do that.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of, you want to come back?
I mean, I don't know, how's the board feel about it? So,
I think the improvements they made to the site plan, I'm very happy with.
so let's do this. If you're all comfortable. We can approve both. We delegate the final decision with respect to colors.
Subcommittee,
Since
John and
he
I.
hangs out at Oxford Pizzeria, it should be pretty easy.
So you want to meet in?
No, I
We could do a
I-
subcommittee.
I think he should bring the materials back, he'll do BAR, will be at the top of the agenda.
Okay. I can always do the materials.
You want to see it, yes.
All right.
Good come to
So
my
we got
office.
I agree with
We
that.
gotta decide something.
I think we should give site
Why you
plan
wanna see the
approval, and
materials?
have to come back with
Okay,
materials.
so is there a motion to approve the subdivision?
I heard stucco, I heard all these different materials, I don't even know what we left it on.
It's
that's why
a
you wanna
brick
see it.
base
Yeah,
with solid
yeah.
That's-
vinyl side.
But the point is that it's September. And it's not April, May, June, July, where there's a buffer period of time that is time-sensitive, weather-sensitive to schedule. And so that a contingent approval allows the applicant to pursue a building permit.
Yes,
And then vet the final finishes on a building we're all I feel like we're all comfortable in its location, in its fenestration pattern, in its accessory details. We're talking about what the upper level is clad with color-wise, and what the lower level is clad with material-wise. It's fairly simple, it seems to me. But that's me.
Okay, Joe, then,
But somebody's gotta decide.
if we could do that, then I trust John.
Why don't we do, we have this with the HPC,
yes.
where something has to be looked at they designate 2 members to essentially look at it. If there's an issue, then they can come back, but otherwise,
Okay,
I'm good.
I like that. John?
Yeah.
That works, you guys can.
Kaya and
Kaya.
John.
John and Kaya.
Okay, so first, let's take care of the business review. So is there a motion to approve the subdivision?
I'll make a motion to approve the subdivision.
Okay. Right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nobody's opposed. Okay. A motion to approve the BAR subject to the final selection of colors will be delegated.
And material.
And material. Exterior material.
Will be delegated to John and Kyle.
I'll second it.
Giving you guys a lot of work. Okay, so you're good to go, you just gotta work it out with these guys.
Right, so who do I contact to,
Why don't you, when you're ready, contact Tracy and she'll assemble your committee,
Supply a phone.
okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
19 Campwood Road. Nothing.
it's going to be put over now. One second, Joe. Mr. Ochagrossi? Mr. Ochagrossi?
He wants to
Do you
talk.
want to address the board? I know you dropped this off, but that deals with the Chabad. Do you just want them to have this letter?
If I could address it, I would like to.
It's okay. Why don't you come up briefly then?
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, board members, when the permits were issued for the Shabbat located on Cambridge Road to work on the meeting house and put an extension on the existing building, some existing conditions had to be improved. 1, replace the wooden fence in the parking lot. 2, repave the parking lot. Here we are years later, and none of these conditions have been corrected. Also, it looks like they have added another extension onto the original extension. Did they get a permit for this? And if not, why not? The building next door that they own has had major renovations done. I stopped counting at 13 dumpsters taken out of this building. When I approached the workers, only one spoke broken English. So this brings up the question, did they use contractors registered with the Westchester County? I believe the county code says only contractors registered and licensed and have insurance are allowed a county permit. Our property values have been affected by this condition and of their property. It is time for the board to do a thorough investigation in the above-mentioned items, and if they are true, the certificate of occupancy should be canceled until all the above are corrected and they follow the laws of Westchester County, Town and Village of Osseo. My name and address and phone number are down here. I would like to be kept in touch, because these violations, they're ongoing. These people seem to think they could do whatever they want. I mean, they're not, it's been years, the lot's not paved, the fence is actually worse than it was before, and it is lowering our property values. I would appreciate if the board would look into this.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll refer this to the building department so that they can look into it and open it up.
And a report back.
And report back to you folks, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think at some point we, whoever we is, there are other items that I've thought about, and I beyond the items articulated in the letter, and I think they're consistent with some of the dialogue at a previous meeting. Now I'm thinking there's some other things too. So I think the resolution really needs to be, the resolution and perhaps the minutes, you really need to look at those in conjunction with the site inspection, because there may be other things in our lives. are inconsistent.
I'll have that taken care of.
Okay. One is your.
We're referring this to the building
introduction
department.
change.
I'm sorry.
Referring this to the building department, to report back to us.
Next month.
Yes.
All right, so Ossining Children's Center here tonight?
Good evening. My name is Howard Milbrett, and I'm the Executive Director of the Ossining Children's Center. I'd like to follow up on a few items that were brought up by the board last month. So I'm going to be very quick. Here's an update. The KG&D design team is following up on some building-related refinements that were asked for by one of the board members. Bus drop-off. We have a meeting scheduled tomorrow with the village engineering to review a new on-site drop-off plan. Parking. My board members have met with several local organizations and we're very close to having it resolved, so much so that at this time we'd like to request a public hearing in November. We really believe that by November, by the date of the November meeting, we should have everything set.
Great, thank you.
Would
We'll be in contact with them.
Okay, November?
Okay, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ossining Volunteer Ambulance Corps.
Good evening, Nancy Arcia representing the Ossining Volunteer Ambulance Corps. A couple of boards familiar with this site. It's right across the street from the existing headquarters for the ambulance corps. They recently purchased a building that was on this lot, which has been demolished. And the purpose of our application is to just have some supplemental parking to get them off the street so they can park some of the vehicles of the volunteers and some of their trailers and so forth, that there's not enough room on there's not enough room on their site, nor do they want to be parking this stuff in the street. So we're trying to advance an application to do that. We also have an application before the zoning board in that we're trying to maximize the use of the lot to get parking. We're building a retaining wall. We're right adjacent to the new Walgreens facility. They have a retaining wall that goes around their property. So in order to flatten this lot out, we are adding a new retaining wall to create a more level surface, regrading it, paving it, and we're also putting in an infiltration system to deal with the increase in runoff as a result of us adding more impervious. But as I noted before, there was a house here, there was a driveway here, so there was some impervious to begin with. So that's, in essence, our application. I don't know if you want to add anything else to that. So,
Dan, this is really like phase 2 of a previous site plan that the Corps was in here for. Really, I mean, we've discussed parking on this site before. And forgive me, I may not recall exactly what the parameters of that proposal were, but at some point you were in here.
no, it wasn't. It was the first time you're seeing.
There was an informal appearance in December of 2016. before the planning board.
Right, and, yeah, I'm not suggesting
Oh,
you
okay.
did.
No, okay. So I wasn't aware.
Whoever
of
it was, this is kind of step two.
You've
Is
seen it
that a fair
before.
characterization?
Well, I mean, we've made a formal application now. It sounds like informally it was presented to you. I think that was before the house was demolished or when you recently purchased it. So the house is gone now, and we're just looking to, dot the i's, cross the t's, and get the appropriate approvals to make
It's not a
this.
surprise. I mean, there's a trajectory to this that we were aware of.
I'm totally new to this, so I have a question that might have been sort of, was the building in such a shape that had to be demolished? Was it not? I mean, I'm just saying in terms of what the property that
I never saw it. It's gone.
There was a single-family house, sorry, I'm Nick Franzoso, the chief of the Austin Military Ambulance Corps. There was a single-family house on the lot which had significant water damage. The outside of the house was redone, but the inside was completely mold-ridden. There was holes through the floors, through all the walls. There was significant damage to the inside of the home, which there was no pipes left in the house. Everything was ripped out, so it seemed like this was the best alternative for us, be right across the street. As per the fact that maybe it could have been restored, who knows? But there was significant damage to the inside, which if the board would like pictures, I can send them.
Okay, so is there any issue, this is an ancillary use to quasi-governmental function.
Tracy and I had long discussions about this. It's a conditional use. It's not really accessory because because the OVAC location is actually a different zone. That's an NC zone. This is an S, or maybe a T zone. This is T, but NC2 is where OVAC is. So it's not technically accessory, but based upon our evaluation of the code, it would be a conditional use permit that they're seeking, because to use the parking that they wish to use at that location requires conditional use, and that's basically what it is.
So parking in the T zone, creating a parking lot in the T zone is a conditional use?
Correct.
Okay. All right, that's easy enough.
I think yeah, so that's where I was headed. I see that we see the lighting proposed and the stormwater management elements. Are there screening elements, plant material, landscaping, fencing, anything proposed?
Currently, we're planning on utilizing the entire piece of the lot for parking. As you can see, the lot is extremely small to begin with, so we're kind of maximizing that property as best we can.
I thought you said there's a fence between the residential property and the property.
The property owner next door is kind of between a fence or not, because it would kind of limit his kind of opening doors and stuff like that, because his driveway is extremely small as well, so it would
So you're
potentially
improving
be...
that ability to open his car door?
Currently, no.
Or the door to the house?
No, his house is, the entrance and exit are to the front and rear.
So you're not really using this as a parking lot, because the way I look at it, you're like tandem parking cars.
Correct.
So it's whoever is on duty is gonna, it'd be like shift rotation or something?
Correct. Typically, we have 5 people on. We are staffed 24/7. We run 2 ambulances and 1 fly car. So it's staffing for those vehicles. We have people who currently park on the street or anywhere else they could find parking, which is not ideal for our location. Over the years, we've increased our staffing levels on the overnight hours because our volume has increased. So in order to kind of keep up with the call volume, we've increased staffing, which has added to parking on the street. There's multiple times a year where weather becomes a problem with snow. A lot of people's personal cars have been hit just by parking on the street.
There's one issue. The way it's proposed now, it's a conditional use standalone parking lot in a T-zone, but can we make that the condition, that permit on if we were to grant it, on that it always be used with the facility across the street, and if that were to cease to be an ambulance squad, then that way we don't end up, if for some reason you were to move and your current facility becomes something else, that we don't have this isolated parking lot as an island in the middle of a residential area.
The thing is, well, you can create a parking lot in a T-zone, you know, like that. Now, what
But
you're
we could
trying
put
to
an
do.
additional condition on that.
I'm not so sure. I understand what would happen if OVAC
Let's-
moved to another location.
Then we're stuck with a parking lot in the middle of a T-zone.
Well, that was sort of where I was getting with my first question, and I go to North Malcolm Street, which is a T-zone, knock down the house and the parking lot.
Maybe if we gave a conditional use permit, but it might not be, we might not give that.
Well, but I don't think you have a choice. Conditional use says it's permitted, but with conditions. So you
We
have to
could
figure
deny-
out what conditions they are.
This parking lot, proposed parking lot is not in the middle of the zone, it's actually adjacent to the commercial zone.
Yeah, it's
It's
at a
surrounded by,
transitional
it's
point.
actually
Yeah.
kind of
Right next
butts
to
in,
Walgreens.
It's the last property in that.
Right,
Yeah, I
Walgreens
think-
is on one side.
right, it really is abutting that farm.
So
the
maybe me
farm-
saying it's in the middle of a T-zone is not quite an accurate
No, I
description,
think if
but-
it was in the middle of a T-zone, you might think that it's not consistent, but I think when it's adjacent to the parking lot and where delivery of
Right.
the farms.
Just go ahead.
So maybe if they were to move and a parking lot behind a drugstore is not necessarily the worst thing in the world.
No.
Are you gonna have a roof for the parking or just empty?
No.
No roof. Trigger any other setback?
And maybe I missed this, the
The zone that they-
paving material itself is, it appears the hatch pattern is a paver, like a precast paver.
No, it's, we have a detail on there, it's blacktop.
So, okay.
It's a
see
fancy
it.
way of drawing.
We were addressing the runoff through the dry wells. We weren't trying to do permeable pavement surface.
Well, I like the hatch pattern.
What variances do you need?
You need a variance for the distance to the property line. Let's see.
We're looking for a 4-foot variance for the required buffer area, which is from the, basically, because there's, in terms of, it's essentially all the driveways, so it's got to, and you're supposed to have 4 feet, and they have an impervious coverage variance that they need.
And the buffer, did you say the buffer?
Buffer is what I meant, the buffer.
Buffer requirements and impervious coverage.
And that's sort of one of the dilemmas on that is, as Nick indicated, the neighbor is interested in having some elbow room. So the thought was to just pave it to be contiguous to the existing pavement edge on the adjacent property.
So you're comfortable that all of the other elements that the teachers are met besides a building not existing?
I think from a planning perspective, this is a health, safety, and welfare thing, to have these people be able to park quickly in an emergency, and if this was, they actually have a closer association with the town, but we kind of, I think we were trying to think, are they exempt because they're a municipal service? When you look at the zoning ordinance, it actually doesn't, it covers fire, police would be exempt, but we don't go into ambulance services, but it is, so it's just something that was probably missed in the intent, that they shouldn't even necessarily be going.
Yeah, they're not for profit, they're not.
But they're contracted through, and there's a taxing district zone in the town, not in the village. Is that how we interpreted it, I believe? So it is, they are
So
taxed,
would they be exempt?
provide a service. They would, if, but our zoning ordinance doesn't say ambulance, it only says fire and police.
And I think if the board looks at it, that we're not trying to squeeze more square footage out of the building. We're really, by getting more parking, we're really trying to address a problem that isn't going away. So the ambulance corps is trying to be proactive about helping out its its volunteers by acquiring this property. And granted, we've got tandem parking. It isn't the best arrangement, but it's an improvement to the situation that currently exists out there.
I'm comfortable in the fact that whether it's in the middle or adjacent to a different zone, parking is, creating a parking lot in a T-zone is a permitted use with conditions. So what would the conditions be that we would impose that it can only be used for their employees, right?
Employees and volunteers, so they're members.
So there would have to be members and or employees of the organization. So it's not for the public.
Correct.
That it be long, not short-term parking, but long, I don't know what the word would be, but it can't be transient parking.
Right.
Okay. So non-transient parking. Because what I don't want to, what none of us want, is somebody decide to take an old house down in the middle of the T district and say, I know how to get cars off the street. I can sell the spaces for $200 a month.
Yep.
To take that a step further, prohibiting them from obviously renting out spaces, like
Right.
kind of what Jeff said, if the
Yeah.
need changes, that they're not there anymore, then not turning into some profit-driven.
It should be tied to the,
That it can't be
The use across the
that it can't be subject,
That's fair.
that the utilization cannot be subject that.
and if that were to change, if they were to move, then whoever required it would have to come back to us.
I think that's a right? Okay, any other questions from the board? Any questions from the public? No questions, or motion to approve with 5 parking spaces?
I'll move.
Second. Jesus. All in favor?
Aye.
Carried.
Thank you very much.
You're all right. Yes.
I'd just like to amend my statement. I said next month, November. Next month, October, we would like a public hearing. We're already into Halloween, so I'm sort of a month ahead.
We won't hold that against you.
We actually still have, through the chairman, I believe, 2 more matters that do not show up on the agenda tonight. The first will be Victoria Home. They are here for site plan approval and BAR, basically they've gone through this a couple of times, a few folks, as you know. It's not in your package because what we did is we approved the neg deck last month, and it got signed, so they're here for this. And then after that, we have 64 Revolutionary Road. It's Ferncliff Manor. Those are the folks who wish to open a residential home at that location. That will actually be part of the public hearing before the Board of Trustees on October the 3rd. But I thought it would be a nice idea to have them come in at least see you folks. But we have Mr. Venditti here first with regard to Victoria Home. David?
Yes, good evening. Thank you very much. Yes, as Mr. Calhoun said, we're here for site plan approval as well as conditional use approval. We were approved last couple weeks ago by the zoning board for our variances, and that was time so that we could get back here in time to hopefully complete this application. So we're here looking for a vote on our site plan approval, conditional use approval, and we have ready tonight to make a BAR presentation with materials with respect to the project.
Has the material changed?
No, it's still cement and stone and asphalt shingles on the roof. We were under the understanding that you wanted to see color selections.
Colors,
As long as you're
yeah.
here.
And it's the second time I've had to drag these samples here.
So let's get them out.
Let's get them out.
I love when you can drag them here.
Not that bad.
I think it's still here.
I'm Mario Victoria of Perkins East.
No, that was,
We have body plank samples. We're going with 2 schemes. We haven't decided yet.
We pull one light, one cool gray and one warm gray. So,
Visualize.
I have a
Is this a
rendering
card
if you
trick?
like. What?
Yeah, let's have the
Is this a
rendering.
card
up.
trick?
You can see it at the same
No.
time.
Sure.
Bigger than mine. Just,
Should distract me.
I'm sorry.
what's distracting?
No.
Yeah, you did.
Oh,
I have
There's a memory stick.
I have a memory
There you
stick.
go.
Okay.
Where's the computer?
And we have. And then we have the stone base. So there's one folder in there, just open. Should be one folder.
Well, it's not, you need it, it's not open, it's not finding it.
Technology.
Working on it. See what?
Yeah.
There should be only one folder.
Just pop up.
Okay.
Now, you know what? Try looking up for it with this PC, see if you can't go up and see if it doesn't have a memory.
There we go.
Got 'em?
Yeah.
Movable this?
Yep, that's the one.
There we go.
That's it.
Which one?
Elevation.
Which one? Okay. The first one's an over. There you go.
Hey, yeah.
There you go. So that's our warm grays. It's taupes and browns with beige, and we have the same stone for both schemes. Eldorado stone on the base. For the retaining walls, we were talking of the Ready Rock that would also look similar to this, only a larger scale. And then the other one is there's your cool grays. We're leaning towards the first one right now, but it hasn't really been decided yet. We haven't finished going around the entire building and detailing and rendering it yet to make a decision, but those are our two.
The Arctic White
schemes.
is on that projected bay, it's a panel system, right? Those are.
Yeah, we have stone base, then we have some areas we're going to have panel, like in the bay that sticks out.
Right.
Other areas we're going to have lap siding, and then in the top gable we're showing a shingle.
A shingle texture.
The texture.
So this is it.
What, you said there's two, are they both up
We
there or
have
just
two.
one?
Well, we have the two color schemes. We have the warm gray and the cool gray. The first
On
one
other
is,
parts of the
Is the other
building.
one there?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
Oh,
the
yeah.
one.
The top,
That's the
that
one.
one.
yeah, and it's both of them are similar, where the bay that sticks out is a panel system. We have the shake or shingle style in the gable, and then we have lap siding in the body of the unit.
So, just so maybe I'm confused. You haven't decided between the two.
We haven't
colors.
decided between the two
Oh,
neutrals.
I misunderstood you
Oh.
and thought you meant you had a color palette on one segment of the building and
I know.
another color.
No, these are the choices, and we
These
hope
are the choices.
you find them both acceptable as they try
We
to
don't get
survey
vote.
what's.
So is the stone base all
Here, let's
all
all
the
vote.
same with the
Blind
vote?
vote.
Is that all in the same base? That's
Yes,
the one thing. So
I
That's what we're going towards
I'm also
the-
thinking of,
the warm.
where do we have, I mean, we have a ton of trees around there, right? Still.
Yes.
So you're gonna be up against the background
does.
of green and dark.
But it's been
So-
brought here before.
So, and what
Just a right
is,
problem.
are there any other retaining walls and, you know, around the parking lot? Parking lot's gonna be blacktop,
We,
I'm
if
assuming.
you, we have an old, we have an overview of the whole site with the planting. I-
First side, okay?
Probably, yeah, yes. Thank you.
Correct.
Okay, that shows the cooler color scheme, but it gives you an idea of,
This is the cooler.
yeah.
This is the gray, not
Yeah.
the white, okay?
And it's a little bit, it's a little bit different than the elevations that were
Yeah.
approved. Because we did this before. You talked about making the bay stick
Right.
out and things like that.
Right,
So this
yeah.
is,
So you had more of the, yeah.
so
there's-
we've added more of
there's a
that.
little
This
bit of
is,
It's more broken up in the current.
Yes.
Yeah, in terms of colors. They don't get the full, I mean, and this looks a little bit more beigey than the cools we have here, but,
yeah, yeah, it's hard to get it exactly, get it right from one computer to the next.
What's the holdup on
Yeah.
making the decision on the applicant side? Well, just out of curiosity, why?
Oh, haven't they made a decision yet?
Right.
Because we haven't made a decision on the interior finishes,
Ah.
and, they're just not there yet. They're
Don't
doing
want
other
to clash.
So,
I hear the words, but I'm not buying it.
so from a context point of view, the darker, even though it doesn't mimic directly the building, the old building that's there, it's close to it. But I kind of don't get the stuff.
yeah.
I wasn't gonna bring it up, but.
You have.
but
You
I-
just did.
It seems like it's not very consistent with the area.
There's not a lot of stone to begin
But
with.
that particular, it's like, for example, the reason I asked is, you got one palette that's essentially gray, but I got a brownstone base. And then I got another one that's sort of in the beige brown area, and,
I mean, yeah, I agree.
yeah, so, but
If-
then you got this other set.
If you go with this, which has some kind of a Tudor feel to it, even though you don't have.
Right.
So you should really have a rubble foundation here. You can still do that with Eldorado.
Yeah,
And
we
you
can.
can, and they have a lot of great grays and warm grays, so you can still keep that sort of, so you can, whatever you put on your roof, and that can sort of band the two together. But I
Right.
think a rubble foundation is much more in keeping with what we have in this area. This is very California.
Here's what I would
To me.
say about that.
What?
Because this is what I was trying to talk the chairman down. And you can either agree from the architectural perspective. So, I think Joe correctly identified this ashlar pattern from Eldorado stone as being a wildly invasive species, and it is. But it is because in the world of faux stone, especially Eldorado stone, they ain't perfected that natural field stone look.
Right.
And this stone pattern hides many sins of what the material's not. So kind of by default, I think this has become the more popular ashlar type joint scenario, because in the end, it just looks better, whether it's appropriate or not. I'm not suggesting
Could
that's,
it be, so could it be gray?
It could be.
The only
If
reason I
we-
say
if we
that
went
is
with
because
gray.
if you turn it around, I know, it's not
right, you want to
not-
go to Burning Man.
Not like this, not what it is, but it's thicker, but I could at least argue that it looks like thick pieces of slate that are what you see.
And you would be correct.
That stone
Right.
Is that available in gray color?
Yes, I think, I have an El Dorado web page. I believe they have different colors on it.
The real deal?
I mean, yeah, what's the difference in cost between that and the real deal?
Oh,
Oh,
what's that right there?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a
There's
gray.
There's a gray.
Oh, those are all the colors on the left.
And there's a gray.
Yeah.
So we could, what we're really showing you is that we're going with a neutral palette, that we've been talking Victorian, and we're not doing a painted lady. Right? Where we're keeping a neutral pattern that is typical for a suburban neighborhood.
But I think it's gonna be highly dependent on which one,
Which color scheme we pick, what stone we pick.
Well, the color, I mean,
Yeah. We're gonna go with this pattern. It's,
well, that's gonna sort of go away, I think, with the trees, et cetera.
we're not using a lot of this,
No, it's not that, it's the whole thing, right? This is a big building.
yeah.
And so what makes it more invisible is the question.
And those are true statements. It's going to be that retaining wall stone that's gonna be, this will pale in comparison to the impact that retaining wall
Right,
stone.
well, right, the reason why we need the stone is because the hardy plank shouldn't be touching the ground. That's the real reason why we're using it.
So do you have images of the retaining wall stone?
There should be a ready rock.
Because I'm not sure everybody understands what that means yet until you see it.
I believe we have a ready rock in there.
I mean, I was thinking more something like this. It's
Hardy
still
plank?
a
No,
square
it should be ready rock.
stacked.
I don't see it.
Oh,
Google it.
Yeah, it looks
yeah,
like,
Google ready rock.
Ready rock.
it's
is
gonna look
another?
like that picture, very similar to it.
Yeah.
REA.
I know you did circulate a picture of
What
it
is it?
from the website. Bless you.
It's first thing, official.
There's the site.
So that,
I think you have to scroll down.
There's a wide range of Ready Rock world. And I don't think any of us, including me, have a clue with what we're getting.
I think you have to scroll down. I remember this page.
Or the scale of it.
Scale.
There's,
Look at something like
No,
I think the image on the
scale of the
left.
actual piece.
On the left, it's
The
a
scale of the pieces is rather large, but the face of the stone makes it look like it's built of smaller stones.
Right, but the image on the left sort of tells the story of Ready Rock in that even where they try to incrementally break up the large piece, you can still see the overriding pattern of the pieces. It's not cloaked very well. And so,
So you're saying as it's tapered back, it still doesn't give you that sense that it's something different other than a mass-produced type of product?
right.
Sorry.
In our case, it's not going to be
Sorry.
tapered back, it's going to be a flush face.
Did you hear that? It's not going to be tapered back in this case. It's going to be flush.
It's going to be more like that.
The one on the left.
I mean,
Upper left.
I mean, go to
personally,
go to
I'm more
homeowners.
concerned about that than I am
I think
the
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
El
homeowners.
Dorado
That was the
stone.
one.
Me too.
Because the El Dorado stone is going to become background. That's the pedestrian experience.
Right.
That's what you're going to be introduced to
Yeah.
up and down the street.
If this is the coloring of what's going to be the retaining walls, I don't know if this works with the darker color that you've got
Right.
brought with you, but
It's
the
not-
lighter, I think the lighter gray that we saw in that image you have in your file.
So click on that ledge stone.
What about that?
Yeah, I was going to say, what can we just hold there? That tells a little bit of the story here.
See,
Let's just start with which one of those at a manufactured stone tends to be the more successful at this scale? Can you go back to the comparison sheet? Which one?
And how tall is that gonna be at the top?
Scroll down. Right, yeah, just get all four of those on there.
Retaining walls?
There you go.
The retaining walls, I think the maximum height, if I'm not mistaken, is 6 feet.
Just in my humble opinion, the upper left is the least successful.
Yeah. I-
It looks like it's been drawn in Adobe and then flash dried
Yeah.
in your microwave.
Keystone looks more, but again, we don't know how many repeats there are.
Right.
I mean, what are the, is it 5, 10, 15, what is it? So,
But we'd have to go back to that, scroll up to that other picture.
so scroll up to the top where you see the coursing, and they come in how many how big are the setbacks? they come in?
That's not the ledge stone.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
So I have a thought. Since we've broken new ground tonight with our subcommittee that approves color, texture, material, we might want to propose that we approve the site plan and VAR subject to the final selection of materials with our subcommittee and the applicant.
And the conditional use permit.
And the conditional use.
That seems fine.
That's completely acceptable.
Board, all right, any questions from the public? No, we lost our planner.
Still take a motion.
All right, is there a motion to approve, Zeus?
Second.
Yes, all in favor?
All in
Aye. Okay.
Excellent.
Now, this is, we let the environmental impact stuff that we
So once again, when we're ready to present,
See, who did we decide? Stuart or who's the?
it was
Tracy.
It was Tracy.
Tracy to go to first and to get the committee together?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Done.
And I really do mean that. I want to thank you for all the courtesies you've extended over.
So you're gonna get it through this time?
Can I have my
Yes.
thumb drive back?
Don't be so quick.
All
It's gonna be the
right.
last time we're gonna see you.
I hope on this application.
Yeah. Well, I meant that.
Thank you.
So, all right.
I hope I'll still be around.
No, I wasn't implying the
Thank you,
other
John.
scenario.
All right. Have a good night. Thank you very much.
everyone. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. While we're waiting for people to leave, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting? Yeah, you were here.
I was here.
I was here, I'll move.
We have a second. John, second, all in favor?
I wasn't here,
You're
so.
not here?
Yeah.
3, 4, we're good.
I don't think I read them. Where are they?
All right,
Is
so,
it?
64, this is-
Ferncliff Manor, 64 Revolutionary Road.
Hello. Kristen Yerzak, I'm the Executive Director of Franklin Manor.
Thanks so much for coming.
Michelle Siege.
I'm the Director of Social Services.
Sure, I'll do it.
Okay, we're listening.
You definitely have us at a disadvantage because we're program people and we're not into rocks and building parts and everything. I mean, we can tell you what I think we submitted some materials. Our architect was supposed to join us, but there was some flooding in his area and he couldn't make it. So we're happy to answer any questions you have. We're planning to purchase 64 Revolutionary Road. And there's our letter.
Because there'll be there's going to be a public hearing before the BOT on October 3rd.
What's the plan?
The plan is to purchase the property and renovate it and use it as an individualized residential alternative for individuals with autism.
And they are past school age?
They are.
Good, so we have just
Yes.
one problem.
Adults.
They're young adults, yes.
So, what, this is informal.
Yes.
Tonight. One of the observations, and I think it's a great idea, is to sort of create a residential environment. But there's a component that comes along with these units. It's called the employees. And so what we've noticed, at least I've noticed, as these move into neighborhoods, parking becomes a problem.
Yes.
So, and ordinarily our zone says these are treated like residences, single-family residences, usually not multifamily residences. Our ordinance says 2 parking spaces. It's clearly not enough. Right? And so I think as we proceed through this, we need to think about how you're going to accommodate the parking for your employees.
Is it 2 parking spaces in the
Well,
driveway
because
or?
however you can contrive parking spaces that don't, you know, they need to fit, you know.
Has no, there's no on parking?
Yeah,
Well, it could be, I'm just saying this is an observation I have.
Yes, there's approximately space for 3 cars in
Okay.
that driveway. The residence itself will have 1 vehicle.
I'm sorry, where is the driveway? Is it?
It's almost.
It
It
goes
goes
down
comes up at an
to,
angle,
Yeah.
comes up this way.
Got it, okay.
and it goes, yeah, straight past that.
So how many employees do you think you'll have?
In total or at a time on a shift?
Yeah, I would have, you gotta think about shift and turnover, right?
So, so at the change of shift, that would be when the most people are there, when,
Right.
people are leaving to go home and people are coming in. But these young men, our biggest thought when we think about staffing is that there's an emergency and they have to evacuate the house. All of these young men can evacuate a premises without much assistance. So at most times, there'll be 2 or 3 staff.
So sort of 3, so if you can deliver a minimum of 3 spaces on the site, that sort of solves the problem.
And we also expect that a lot of our staff will probably, because it's close to public transportation, they'll probably use public transportation. So we're hopeful. I mean, I can't promise, like, I'm not an expert in parking,
No, it's
but
fine.
that's what I expect. You know, it's not the highest paying job, and so a lot of people can't afford their own cars.
No, I get it, that's fine. Just because in Revolution Road, there's like no street alternative to park.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know the property very well. There's definitely 3 spaces. I know a
Okay.
minivan and 2 cars can
So
fit in that.
when you come here for, I guess,
October 3rd, that will be for the
Yeah, they will
DOT.
be coming back.
say, you'll come, you're done with that.
Yeah.
So I would just show the village board how you're gonna park the car.
Yes, we will. And our architect will be there with us, and that's a
Perfect.
lot more idea of what
Okay.
we're doing.
Good. I don't have any questions? No, good.
Thank you.
very much.
That was painless. Thank you very much.
Don't let that get around.
I won't go with that. Are you serious?
Consider parking of the board. They have to
So we
consider the
should talk.
concentration. That there's very limited
I know,
scope,
but it's a problem. We gotta figure out how to solve it.
but that's, the state would,
Somebody's gotta talk to Sandy English then.
right, that's what it
Because
is.
they infiltrate, it's a problem. And-
That's why I did map it, because I did take the data. They give you stuff you couldn't tell what it was. I
know,
did map.
but if they can do
the-
it, they should do it.
It is the state, and they consider it a single-family residential.
How they wanna deal with it. I'm just telling you, it's the bane of the problem. Okay, so we have one other thing to do. I don't understand this cut and fill that I've been asking. And there are 2 things. One, I don't understand it. I don't understand why suddenly planning cut and fill permits. But I don't, from all this data, I can't tell whether they passed the soil inspection or not. And the 3rd thing is, I don't have the authority that's handed down from my board to allow me to take this on.
Then what I will do, based upon the comments, and since I haven't seen that, and I wouldn't know what I'd be looking at anyway, regardless of what hat I'm wearing tonight, why don't I do this? Let me speak to the building inspector and find out exactly what the situation is, particularly with regard to, was the fill clean, which seems to be a critical issue. And then I'll report back to you folks.
We have a very detailed report, but in the report, it doesn't say anything.
So why don't I get that answer before we do that, and then we can, and then we can just come back next
And
week.
I don't know how much.
Right, so let me get those answers, then I can come back here in October.
Good.
Joe talked to me a little bit about
Yeah.
this, but it's something that, how this is approved,
We'll take care
has
of
to
it.
be taken into
I
account.
may be denied on
It actually, right now, it doesn't require it to go to the board at this time. That's how it's written. As far as I understand, I
A lot of feel good.
I didn't look at
And
it.
I guess Joe has been allowed to sign off.
There's
There's no indication that
feel like,
Phil was
the guy who
included,
sells
so.
that property, yep.
What happened at 77 Broadway? Did
No,
that
it
get-
actually, the.
It was
code
folded up
asks
from
the
last
planning
month.
board for approval.
So basically, last month, you essentially gave the approval. even
Oh,
though-
so we're done with this, they just,
Okay.
Maybe a skylight. Sign it.
We're finished.
Okay.
Make sure.
Yeah.
Make sure I-
Can we take a moment and just have an informal adults in the room conversation?
Yes.
So
Well,
that,
we
so
should,
that,
Are we gonna keep Catherine here? 'Cause she's-
no, no, we
Let's
don't.
close the
So,
meeting.
I mean, well, we can't do that.
No.
So,
And sir, are you here for something? I apologize.
I represent Dee Dee's Diner.
oh,
Oh, hello, Mr. Turner, how are you?
Mr. Kahan, hello.
There's nothing gonna happen tonight.
Understood. I wanted to make sure the members of the board had the letter all had the letter. There was some confusion about you getting it.
I got, because it was the wrong email address,
That would explain it.
but it's all fine, and it will all, and it's been circulated around, but, you know, we weren't discussing it tonight, but it has been circulated around.
Okay. And, I thought I would attend in case it came up. You never know what happens at these meetings.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
all right, great.
And I'm available if there's any questions.
Got it, I appreciate it.
Shall I continue?
You may.
I'm closing the record.
You will close the record, please.
So, I feel like the email that I only got in a tertiary way, because I'm still not dialed into
Well,
this.
I know what email you're talking about.
Right, well, I just feel like it, it's given the significance and the milestone of the board about to evolve, in the biggest single increment since I've been on this board, which has been a long time, I think other people, that there's not any dialogue about it, seems a little at best clumsy. I think there are other ways to characterize it, but that's not really the point. I feel like, first of all, the baseline metrics we don't understand. There are 4 vacancies, but the data suggests there are only 3. So can we just talk about what some of this means and doesn't mean?
I'll do it as best I can.
Well, that's all I'm asking
Because-
for.
No, because it's actually sort of, it's one of the rare times I can say, well, you don't know as much as, sometimes I'm glad to.
And that's fine.
What I think occurred
I
was
just-
this. The village manager was aware that there were a number of appointments that need to be made for next year. And we also have a number of appointments that need to be made immediately. We have an EAC, which right now is at bare quorum strength, because 3 people, 1 person has not attended 1 meeting and 2 just resigned.
We're not doing good with that.
They just, I had them up to 7, and it was great, and then it just sort of went poof. Well, I just don't know what
Excuse
happened.
me, Joe, do we need to have that recording still?
Oh, no.
Oh,
Catherine, we can take that off. Thanks.
I'm just,
Thank you, Jesus, I appreciate it.
just looking up.